Welcome to New Southern Heretics. Today's show is brought to you by the letter Bad Motherfucker. And sitting across from me is a bad motherfucker. Trojan P.I, private investigator. What's up, dude?
Not much, man. I totally thought we was going to talk about my wildly unpopular Etsy store for crocheting anal beads, but I guess we'll talk about private eye stuff.
I wonder how somebody gets into the anal bead market though. Like we got time. We could talk about PI stuff.
Well, I mean, it all kind of started on a whim, you know. I just regular anal beads just weren't doing it for me, but you know, so I got into crocheting and I was really good at it. So I was just like, I know I can crochet a ball that I can shove up my ass, and that's, you know, just kind of where it all just, you know, spiraled out from there.
Now, this may be the top question. I'm not sure, but when it comes to cleaning them, would you have to go to a dry cleaner? Because I imagine you wouldn't you can't machine wash them, right?
You can, but they shrink. That was actually part of my whole business plan, is that I knew that they would do that, so that would mean that people would have to be repeat customers and would have to repetitively buy these from me. But like I said, my Etsy store is wildly unpopular. So
well, I mean, these are tough times.
It is tough times. It is.
So how did you become a private investigator? Because whenever I knew you, you were a butcher. I mean.
Well, yeah, I was a butcher for several years, and I worked in basically the restaurant industry for a fairly extended period of time. And I had a buddy that I went to high school with, who basically wrote me into it. I'd went and I'd lived down in Florida on a beautiful remote tropical island for a few years, and when I came back, I had just turned 30 years old, and I was just came back to Valdosta, and I just did not know exactly where I wanted to go, and I didn't have a whole lot of direction outside of, you know, doing more management and the restaurant industry and stuff like that. And he talked me into it, and believe it or not, when somebody asks you, do you want to become a private investigator, my initial and very strong mental thought process was like, no, do not. Why would you're not a private eye. Why would you do this? But for whatever reason, I said yes. He's like, I'll take care of all your training, your licensing, and stuff like that. And a lot of it, he threw me into it, and it was just, trial by fire. And it was so much more than what I thought it was. It certainly wasn't like, Magnum P.I. on TV or anything like that, but not that it didn't lack the excitement that, occasionally occurs with it, but
right.
Turns out it's a lot of sitting in your car and peeing in bottles. Like my car right now, I guarantee you there's at least 6 bottles of urine in there.
Well, if you ever get to Bear Grylls level of panic survival, then you're prepared, because can't you can drink your own pee.
You can, and I have, mostly by accident. You really shouldn't. There's certain, I believe it's the vitamin water energy that has a very pale yellow color to it. It's hard to tell the difference whenever you're in your car at night. So I've kind of had to steer away from that flavor. You have enough of those mishaps, and you just kind of just decide you don't want to drink that anymore. So. But it's
what would you say is the biggest misconception about your occupation?
The amount of boredom that's actually entwined into it, because it's usually a good solid 80% boredom and just sitting in a car and watching, and then another 10% of mild excitement. And then another 10% of I'm probably going to die today. This is it. I'm sorry, God, for all the sins I've committed. This isn't worth the money. I can't believe that this is why I'm going to die today. But yeah, pretty much so that there's a lot that goes into it that people don't see, because anytime you see a private eye on television, you always see the highlight reel of all the excitement that is taking place around you,
Right.
and they don't show you like how much effort it takes to get to that. Like sitting outside somebody's house, hiding in a bush in a ghillie suit, for 10 hours, waiting on them just to walk out the door, and you'd be surprised how boring people actually are. Some people are very interesting, but
I would imagine that it's a very, at first maddening, but once you get, I guess, conditioned to it psychologically, very meditative, like, trance state, because you would have to be still in a ghillie suit, right?
Oh yeah, you have to be extraordinarily. Well, it kind of depends on what your setup is, because we use all kinds of a range of different video equipment and things like that, and like we have things that have monster zooms on them, and so I can be, like somebody, let's say they live in a house, bordered by a field. I can be anywhere from a half a mile away from their house and, watching their front door in 4K, and it's easy to see everything that's going on that property. And the camouflage is just more or less there to, let me blend in so nobody sees a guy standing there in a white t-shirt, at the edge of the woods. But
what about animals? Like, I imagine, like, maybe not dogs because of the scent, but I imagine that, like, most, like, domestic animals wouldn't recognize you as well.
Well, I've had dogs key in on me, but I've also had wildlife. I've had deer, like bucks, get really close to me, and that's actually a fairly, scary scenario, because, like, they're fairly stealthy creatures, themselves, and you don't hear them coming. And I've had, like one come up on me, and depending on what time of the year it is, that could be a fairly dangerous encounter. But one of my tricks is since I just, not to, go back to, piss and urine, but this is where we're going with this, is that when I'm in the woods like that, I'll tend to like pee around myself so that I like pronounce my human presence to all the animals that are, in my vicinity.
Smart thinking.
Yeah, so hopefully that, keeps them away from me. Cause
are you worried that though that scent might attract a Sasquatch if it is in rut?
I do worry about that, but I'm also open to new experiences, so we'll see how it goes.
That's good logic.
Yeah, so I mean it gets boring out there, man. So I've made friends with turtles. Like you'd be surprised if you sit in the woods long enough. I guess any hunter would probably tell you this. If you sit in the woods long enough, you'll see things. But I don't get the luxury of sitting in a tree stand. Sometimes it's just me laying like on my stomach for hours on end, like just right on the dirt, which draws every single flea and tick that you can find, and nothing will wake you up quite like finding a tick on your privates. That's a sobering experience,
no doubt,
because you got to figure out a way to get that thing off. And the first time it happened to me, I thought I was going to have a coronary right there on the spot. I actually called the other investigator that I was working with, and I was like, "I need you to come get me. I need you to come get me right now." He's like, "Did somebody find you, or did you get burned out there? Or something? What's wrong?" I was like, "No, man. I've got a tick on the head of my penis, and we've got to do something. We got to do something now." He's like, "Man, you're just gonna have to wait." I was like, "I'm gonna get Lyme disease." He's like, "Oh man, you're tougher than that." And
you don't have a tick on your dick.
Yeah, yeah. Turns out that we've all got our breaking point, and at that moment in time, that was it. Of course, it's happened, since then, and I was a lot better. And luckily, I can say I don't think I have Lyme disease.
Well, that's good.
But it's just one of those things.
Have you ever been caught before?
Oh, several times. Private investigations is a pretty much so a delicate tightrope walk between being too aggressive and not
too passive.
Yeah, too passive. And sometimes there's just things that happen that that's just beyond you, that you can't, because there's like, especially like when you have like domestic cases with spouses and things of that nature. the spouse has hired, you as a private investigator, and sometimes they, get a little enraptured at the fact that, they've got somebody, watching their spouse or their ex-spouse or, what have you, and, they'll tell a friend or something like that, thinking that they have their trust, and then that friend turns out they actually like the other party a lot more than they did our client, and, information leaks out, and that person's on the get-go. And sometimes you just have people who have amazing situational awareness, and those will actually sometimes be people that you just would never think would have that kind of situational awareness. They have no military or police background, anything like that, but they just notice everything, and that's just how they're put together, and they catch on pretty quick, when there's a car following them, or stuff like that. And then some people, like, with workers' comp, people who've been injured on the job and they're in the middle of a huge lawsuit, they've been coached by their attorneys, and the attorney has basically told them, hey, there's a good chance that the opposing counsel is going to hire a private investigator to follow you around and see if you're actually injured. So do your best to not or just watch your back in general. So you have stuff that happens like that. I mean, I'd have to say that it's literally like 10% of the time that I do get caught. And to me, that's actually a pretty good number, because just the volume of people that I watch on any given year, which is in the hundreds.
Right.
That works for me, because I like to think of myself as a fairly aggressive investigator who, will get out there and get all up in your shit and, find out. And like I said, a lot of these times, these places I go aren't even in the local area. I travel all over the state of Georgia. And so I go to places I've never been before and circumstances I've never been in, and, still manage to, pull out a win. So.
Right. I know I've been with you on a couple of runs, and the first time we went, I mean, they're all a thrill for me, just because it's just like a it's not normal for me, so it gives that aspect of an adventure, right? Plus, I mean, I'm just hanging out with my pal and getting out of the house. Yeah. But the first one was just like a GPS swap, I remember. But then the next, I think, two were like we went to places. It's okay, we're gonna go here and just.
Yeah, GPS placements are actually one of the more dangerous things we do, because we do those, or we have a tendency to do those on public property and stuff like that. But you still have to get underneath that person's property, place that unit on there, and you still have to be able to put it in a place where it won't be found, and also where you can remember to actually find it and pull it back off. And sometimes you have extremely short windows in time in which to pull that off. But the technology of GPS tracking makes it to where it's just you're able to build up a database of patterns on that person and what they do and where they go, and how often they stay at point A, point B, point C. And then you can take and look at all these different places and find out who lives here, who does that, and that's part of what builds our case and our understanding of who this person is, where they go, and what they're about. And a good 80 to 90% of their activity you can just write off and say, well, all right, this is just them doing their everyday normal things like any other human being. But then you have these other things where you're just like, well, what is this? What is it that they're doing here? And then we'll slide the focus of our investigation, to those points and places, and try to dig in deeper to what's going on here, and if that's where we need to set up a more in-depth type of surveillance, scenario where we end up in the ghillie suit, or if we can do it from the car, or any of these different scenarios. But it's all geared towards getting definitive answers and being able to give those back to our clients, so that
have something tangible to
yeah
show
tangible them. Yeah. And some of these cases that we get, it's hard to get to that point, because people especially on when you have domestic cases where you have child custody, divorces, sometimes you're limited by what their financial means are. because we've had cases where, people, like, the guy knows his wife is cheating. He just knows it. And he's just like, all right, well, I can afford 8 hours of surveillance. And we're like, okay, well, we'll go out and see what we can find out. And those 8 hours of surveillance don't necessarily always occur on the same day. That might be over like 2 or 3 days or whatever, or just whenever he's like, I'm out of town. She has the ability to do what she wants, so I want to find out what she's doing right now. And then, we'll go and we'll work that, but, nothing happens. And so he's like, okay, well, I didn't get the answers that I wanted. It's like, well, sometimes these things go like this. Like I said, we've had clients who have literally spent thousands of dollars. I mean, like, immense amounts of money, trying to catch their wife cheating, and they know their wife's cheating, and they're fairly confident in it, and they're just trying to get this information, for legal purposes or whatever. And we put all this time and effort in it, and then there's nothing to show for it. And it's not because the woman's not cheating; it's more or less because she's a 65-year-old woman. She doesn't have the sex drive of a 20-year-old woman, or even, like the sex drive of a 35-year-old woman. So, like, she does occasionally have these trysts with other men, but they're so random and sporadic that it's hard to really, like, narrow it down to where you could have us there at the exact time that it's going to happen. So, I mean, it's like, if you have the money to invest in it to where you can actually delve that deep into it, then that's great. But for some people, like, if it's not like something that you feel is occurring on a fairly frequent basis, then maybe this isn't the route that you want to take.
Right.
So, but nowadays technology is at a point where GPS systems are extraordinarily cheap for live tracking. You can go online, get a GPS, put it on your spouse's car, and see everywhere that they are and where they go. So if you're like some kind of a freaky control freak, there's technology out there, and then mini cameras, abound. So there's all this different things that people can do, where they almost don't even need us. But with that said, if there's any kind of legal avenue that they're trying to pursue with it, it doesn't matter, because any attorney worth of salt would get all that stuff thrown out, and you're liable to get a restraining order for
for the GPS tracking.
Well, just for infringing on your spouse's privacy.
Yeah.
But
which there's some validity to that.
Oh, there's a lot of validity to that, but we're considered like a neutral third-party observer,
right?
And as licensed investigators, like, we're given leniency, and
because technically y'all are a servant of the court, depending on the circumstances, correct? Like, so if it's like a civil court case, and they need to have some sort of documentation to, what's it called in the court? Discovery, right? To like share, like, well, all this. I'm no lawyer,
yeah.
Sir. But,
well, I wouldn't say we're not agents. We're not agents of the court. I would never say it that way.
Well, if you're serving a subpoena or something, though.
Well, that exists on a completely, like, separate level from, like, private investigations.
Right. I get that, because, like, private investigators, it's a very multifaceted industry. You know? Because it's not just spying on a spouse or serving a subpoena. There's a lot of, like, nuance to it.
Yeah, but you could serve a subpoena and not be a private investigator.
Correct, but you would still point being a servant of the court if you're a private investigator or not. If you're serving a subpoena. Isn't that still the will of the court?
Yeah. If there's a legal document that's within my hand, and I've been, and the court's, signed off on allowing me to serve that paper, then I am basically an agent of the court that's gone out, and I'm serving that paper. And like, if I needed law enforcement's help, like, they would come and help me to make sure that it happened, which that's rarely occurred, but. It does happen on occasion. We've had a couple of those. But for the most part, as far as being a private investigator, depending on the judge, some of them don't even really care for us in general, I don't think. But and some attorneys definitely don't. It just depends on if you're which attorney it is, and if you're working for them or against their client. So.
Well, it's kind of like it has ties, I guess, to like things like contrarians and skeptics and things of this nature, because you're almost a competitor of justice in that circumstance, right? So if you all are able to provide data that can get say somebody a defendant, like the underdog or whatever, get them so they win the court case or whatnot. I think that
it's beneficial.
It's irksome to people that are trying to.
Well, it's beneficial to our client. Now it kind of depends on what section of what I do that you're talking about. Like, so let's say workers' comp. I'm hired by an attorney or a business, and they're trying to, they're looking out for their best interests. But I go out and I start my day and I watch the person, and what they do is really completely up to them. Like I said, I'm a neutral third-party observer. If they decide they want to pick up a car battery, with a severe back injury and do jumping jacks with it, I just happened to be there watching them. I was paid to watch them, and that's what they did. Now, if I was to go and sprinkle, $5 bills outside their car door, and then wait for them to come out and watch them bend over and pick it up. Now, of course, they still did choose to do that, but I would definitely be doing things to help my client out by putting them in a situation to where they were just, I've got to bend over and pick up these $5 bills.
I mean, if I saw $5 bills outside of my property, I'd be picking them up.
But at the same time, when you're telling, your doctors and your attorneys, I can't even bend over to do this or anything like that, so I need $1 million, people start getting real serious about, wanting answers. And of course, now what I said about with the $5 bills, that would be considered, highly unethical, and I am just an extraordinarily ethical private investigator who is just beyond reproach. But I mean, there probably is people in my industry who does some shady things like that. But I mean, you just never know where you're going to find a $5 bill, so it's just hard to say.
Right. I wonder with because I mean, pretty much you guys can you can occupy the role of a detective outside of law enforcement as well. You know what I mean? So if someone has been a victim of the court system and they need a detective, like private investigators offer that. So
yeah, we've had people who, they didn't feel like things were investigated well enough through the system, and they've come to us. And usually, though, I have to say, for the most part, a lot of detectives, in the police force, they usually do a fairly thorough job, and we are actually kind of hesitant with some of these with criminal investigations because you're upsetting an apple cart that that doesn't really help us in any way, but there's all the potential to hurt us,
right?
Because we don't work with the police, but we let them know when we're around, and what kind of not exactly what we're doing, but hey, I'm here. And we've heard countless stories. It's never happened to us. We've always had a fairly decent relationship, especially with local law enforcement, to where there's never been any issues. But I've heard stories of other places where they burnt some bridges with law enforcement, and they'll just take and park their car right behind you every time you go on surveillance, because they're like, oh yeah, you guys want to mess with us, all right, so you don't think we know how to do our job.
Good luck being clandestine with a fucking cop car.
Well, I mean, it's the South, and it's the whole good old boy system, that's prevalent.
We can definitely unpack that ideology.
I mean, but it exists, and I mean, sometimes it's beneficial, for folks, and other times it's not.
Like most things, nuanced.
Yeah, everything's always nuanced, but I mean,
not in today's world, sir.
Yeah, but me, I'm a huge skeptic about everything, and if there's one thing working as a a private investigator has taught me is to not let, you have these storylines that you tell yourself as you go through a case where you just like, you just see the whole scenario in your head and you're just like, okay, all right, I've got this woman all figured out. She's a meth addict and this is what she's doing. This is everything that she's going to do is based off of, these 2 or 3 pieces of evidence that I have against her. And so I have this whole story built up in my head, and I've learned that sometimes that'll take you down the wrong path because you'll be so certain that, that's the way that, things are and that's the way that you should pursue. And then it turns out that that's not even the case. Like, you were completely wrong, but you allowed yourself to become so certain of your ability to decipher information that you end up looking like an idiot on the other side of it. So I've got to where like I don't build up these narratives in my head,
especially with a meth head, because those motherfuckers are unpredictable.
Yeah, well, most people, truth be told, people are a lot more erratic than you would think.
You're preaching to the choir on that one. We live in 2020.
Yeah, well, I love hunting people. Like, I don't even... Well, like when I was younger, I hunted deer and stuff like that.
We'll have that in quotes. I love hunting people.
Well, but like when I was younger, you like to hunt deer and like, deer for the most part, you know what they're going to do. Like it doesn't really take a rocket scientist, if you've grown up in the South to kind of, figure out what to do. To catch a deer, you either sit in one place in the woods till they come along. You put out some food, it'll go to it. You set up on a deer trail, something will pass through it. You get you a call, something will come to it. But like people, like there's just no telling what the fuck they woke up thinking they were gonna do that day.
Dude, I remember there's one you took me on where we went to a bar, and we were. I didn't know what we were doing. You were just like we're just gonna go here, like go in, like have a drink. I'm like, all right, yeah, that's fine, whatever. And then the client showed up, like
and they were standing right behind us. Yeah, I remember that. I was so mad.
I was like, how stupid.
Yeah, those people were crazy. I think they're still together. It's like. But you have people like that. That's like with domestic cases, man. Like
I imagine that like 20 years from now, if like that's the kind of like relationship that I'm in at the autumn in my life, what a hellish relationship to be in. Fuck that shit, dude.
Some people, I actually think like they get their rocks off on that.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, the melodrama of it.
Yeah,
all?
The pain's a drug to them. Like
yeah. Well, then the only drug that they do consume, alcohol, and they typically abuse that, but...
It gives you a lot of insight into the psychology of, I guess, relationships in general. Like, you see some people that just, like, it doesn't matter what the other person, how they make them feel, as long as it makes them feel something extreme. And
right.
that's something, there's these, huge currents of emotion flowing through them at all times. And if everything's calm and peaceful, they're not going to be happy in their relationship. But I think that's just a personality type, for the most part. Like, these are just people that are just wild people.
It's I think it's like a genetic program, right? Mm-hmm. That we tap into. It's kind of from our ancestors, but I think something like that, if that extreme, that rush that they get, the adrenaline, it has significance to them, to their lives.
Well, that's why some of these people cheat on their spouse in the first place. Like they've been married for such and such many years. They've had children, and we can all easily go back and remember, like the first time you ever hooked up with somebody you didn't know. Like there's a rush of excitement that comes along with that. And so some of these people, which is why they fight so hard to keep it a secret from their spouse, like they have no desire to leave their spouse. Like, as far as they're concerned, what you hear over and over again is, I loved you, I just, I just, wasn't happy, I needed something extra in my life.
I have needs.
Yeah, they have needs, and they've had sex. These people have been having sex for the last 20 years, and like they just wanted that rush of excitement, and which I get that. Like, hey, you wanted to feel something. I mean, fuck, go bungee jumping.
Dude, there was this one woman that this was like. I guess probably around Thanksgiving of last year or so, that I'm a bachelor, so I use dating apps, and I had like matched with her, like her profile, just certain things I look for. Like, she stood out as an individual, and she had tattoos that weren't shitty. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
She had good rhetoric. I like that whenever like I can read somebody as communicative, and especially in rhetoric, because it's a dating app. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So like you're just using the visual aesthetics and visual data to process it. So she, we meet or whatnot. We're hanging out, and she tells me that she has 4 kids. That she and her husband got married when she was like 17 and he was like 19. It was legal for him to do so. Mm-hmm. That was the only man she'd ever been with, and that he had something wrong with him, that he became, I guess, so OCD that a routine, like a daily routine, other than like raising their kids and like their kids finding their own way, but between he and his wife, every day had to be exactly the same. Every year the vacation had to be exactly the same. They had to have like everything set in order. She had to keep her body in a certain condition, like a super controlling spouse. You know what I mean?
Yeah, OCD.
Oh yeah, to the extreme, and over like 20 years, right? Like she had dealt with this. And she said that she gave her kids to her mom and said, I'll be back in 30 days, and made sure that they were all taken care of. Didn't tell them where she was going. She was in Ohio. She traveled down to Tallahassee for an ayahuasca experience, because she had met somebody online that was a shaman, and they had contact for about 2 years of going back and forth, and this was her like her moment of like self-discovery, I guess, was this big psychedelic experience, and I was on her way there, and she told me that I reminded her nothing of her spouse, because I'm eccentric, overweight, a little crazy, but not bad crazy, and intelligent, and she said that that was so attractive to her, and I was like, thank you, universe.
And see, there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, no, not because of my benefit, but because of like,
even for her.
That exactly. That like this moment is like what woke her up, right? So a lot of people, myself, the internet is normally what did it for me. Is like, we didn't have to go to institutions anymore to acquire knowledge, and like you and I, being like the fucking idiot geniuses that we are, have like always been able to bond over like bigger concepts, and not like about like, who's it? Eleanor Roosevelt said that like ideas were the apex of conversation.
Yeah. Simple people talk about people. Average people talk about things.
Events. Events. That was the second one. Yeah.
And then like truly gifted people talk about ideas, which that's awfully that's. Considering that we talk about ideas, that's very self-gratifying for us to say that about ourselves. But I think me and you have long since abandoned any pretenses about our ego. So
like I try to be a good person. I've done bad things, and but like I'm still here.
That's
and people I've wronged, like they know I've wronged, because like I've had to go to them, and with an eat crow.
Yeah,
I guess is the expression or whatnot. So all I can do now with my time is like well, let me try to escape the matrix, right? So like I can elevate my consciousness and my magnetic ethereal body to a higher frequency and like get out of the program and ascend and see what's the next set of programs are like. I think that the idea of intelligent design and the simulation theory, like, are they can coexist completely. And I think if more people that are more fringe believers into theism or atheism would sort of just dip your toes in the other one's water for a second, and I think that these two unifying ideas can.
Well, I mean, there's grains of truth in both of them. You know what I mean, so.
But I think those two are so much more likely than like, oh no, this is all just happenstance. Everything, this is just billions of years of just whoopsie daisy.
Yeah.
Now we're here. Purpose is just something that you lie to tell your ego about yourself. There is no purpose. We're all going to die one day, and you've done nothing worth a damn so far. So maybe you should try to wake other people up to how fruitless life is and tell them the same thing. Like, that's a miserable fucking existence.
It is. Nihilism is fairly miserable, but at the same time, in which I'm not a nihilist, but I always have to, for all the other, thoughts and ideas that I entertain, I've always found it safer or even somewhat comforting to think that my existence is ultimately pointless. Like, I know that whenever I find myself on the deathbed, that I probably won't be so inclined to think that I'm just fading into oblivion and nothingness. But at the same time, I have to entertain that that's a realistic possibility.
Yeah, what was it? Pascal's dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one where it's like live your life as if God does exist.
Oh no, I like to live my life as if God doesn't exist, and like I've said before, I'm fairly certain when I die, I won't be surprised either way. So,
well, I don't know. I think the idea of life being one giant if then else statement, right? That makes a lot more sense to me. And like this notion of there used to be 4, now they argue 5 of the personality types, right? So you take an emoji and its mouth is either up or down, and its brows are either inward or outward, right? And then the 5th one they now have is neutral. Like, but those are like the archetypes of personality traits.
Well, that's just like Dungeons and Dragons. Like, I've always liked to think of myself as chaotic neutral, especially as far as like thought goes.
I've never played D&D. My brother and I, we didn't have too many friends growing up. So D&D, you need more than 2 people to play.
Well, yeah, you really do, but
I mean, it's as dorky as it is. It's a bucket list thing. It's like I want to play some like epic D&D and like more than one round of it, because I need to pop my cherry first. You know what I mean?
Well, you got to get the right dungeon master.
I think our friend Justin would be a good one. He would always recommend other friends of his. He's like, I'll tell you who the best dungeon master is right now.
Oh, I got a buddy of mine.
We played Hero Quest. Was what I was going to say. It was a Milton Bradley tabletop game.
Me and my buddy, we used to hide in a teacher's room during lunch with a bunch of other geeks and nerds, because we actually thought we had some kind of like standing within the hierarchy of cool kids, but
in hindsight, you kind of do.
No, I didn't. I definitely didn't. Dude, I played the clarinet, and
well, I mean, to prepare you for
I was a drama kid.
To prepare you for adulthood, I would say that like because I mean you're not socially inept now. Like you definitely have a bit of a silver tongue when it comes to social interactions.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I refined that from the time I came from a Pentecostal background, and my dad, he went out and evangelized and stuff like that, and even when I was a kid, I would mimic him and pretend to be a preacher and get up and preach to everybody and all that jazz. And hell, even when I was younger, I would, of course, I can't believe I'm going to put this on audio, but I would dress up like a clown and go stand in front of my parents' house and literally talk to anybody who was stupid enough to happen to walk past it. I would stop them right on the spot, and of course, who's not going to stop and talk to a 7-year-old clown in the middle of summer, in the middle of the day? I mean, it makes all the sense in the world.
I think the question to ask is, do you want the people that would stop to talk to a 7-year-old clown to stop and talk to you?
Well, it was a lot of old people where I lived, so I loved old people. Like like elderly people when I was younger, like I was always vastly fascinated by them. Like there was a woman
that survived.
Yeah, there was a woman who was I think she was like 97, 98 years old that lived next door to us when I was growing up.
She's still alive?
No, she died years and years ago. She actually had been a designer for it, not for, I can't remember the name of the company, but in Paris, like back in like the 20s.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and so like I was just over the moon enamored with her, and she had the most interesting stories that she would tell me, you know, about her travels and, you know, stuff like that. And then you know, she passed away, and I actually thought that was the worst thing ever. But even like with my parents' church, like, you know, 90% of the people there were old people, and I was like one of the only young kids, so they all, you know, took their time with me and you would talk to me. And of course I was always inquisitive, so I always wanted to know stuff, and so given the opportunity I would talk their ears off and listen a good bit too, but a lot of talking on my part. So
I was always a rather talkative child. Then on road trips, they always made sure that my Discman had batteries.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, you're a little bit younger than me.
I didn't get into music until I was like 5th grade or so. Like, that's why I found out who Soundgarden was. I was like, what is this? Like, this is really heavy. I mean, it's not heavy by today's standards at all, but I mean, for the time, it was like 1995. And like we didn't have the only radio stations that they had in Huntington, West Virginia, is almost all country, and then you had an old timey one. So I like riding in the car with my grandma because she would play like the old timey one from like the 40s and 50s, and classic rock. So like I liked Barracuda by Heart because it would always come on the radio.
Yeah.
There was an old folk song. I think it was "The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald." I liked that one. But then, like, I heard Soundgarden. It was like right when CDs came out because my mom got or I don't know, right when they came out. It was right whenever we got one though. It was '95, and she got a CD player, and like she got a Soundgarden CD, and I just became enamored with it. And then I discovered that like my parents told me that like MTV wasn't bad. Catholic school taught me that MTV was bad and that I shouldn't watch it because all they talk about is sex and drugs on there. And my mom was like I don't give a shit if you watch MTV. She's like, I don't want you watching it late at night because that's when, you know, they would play like she didn't like Beavis and Butthead, and then they would play like some of the more risque videos on either 120 Minutes or Yo MTV Raps. You know, you'd have like they would play like LL Cool J doing it on Yo MTV Raps, and like it's not a very subtle song.
So your childhood sounds magical. As I stated earlier, I came from a Pentecostal background. My musical, it was either listening to Southern Gospels, which was, you know, basically the equivalent of wrapped up, tied up, tangled up in Jesus, wrapped up, tied up, tangled up in Jesus. Or, you know, like the Statler Brothers, which, I mean, I actually love the Statler Brothers, to this day. But my mom, like, she listened to, like, what is it, Neil Sedaka, ABBA. To this day, I have an uncanny, like, love of ABBA when I hear them, just because I heard it so much as a child. Yeah, it's so way out there, right? And then when I was growing up, I wasn't allowed to listen to any kind of rock or anything like that. And I only, like, I could, every once in a while, you know, I'd listen to the radio, but if they heard me listening to it, like, you know, turn that devil music off. And my sister, she was allowed to, like, listen to, like, Janet Jackson, you know, stuff like that. So I would, you know, steal her tapes and listen to those. And it's probably one of the reasons why I ended up getting into electronica music, you know, so much, was because there wasn't any lyrics to it. There was nothing for my parents to rage against. It was just, extraordinarily fast tribal beats, like the Chemical Brothers and, things of that nature. There was no sex. There was no anything. It was just, it was basically, the way I saw it, it was just modern day classical music, And so, like, that was something that I, everyone at the time, who were like my friends were like, you listen to what? And I'd be sitting there like trying to make them listen to it, and they're just like not feeling it at all.
I always liked a wide variety of music. Like, how could you not like the Prodigy's "Fat of the Land" if you grew up in the '90s, man?
Yeah, well, let me tell you something. That tape was one of the first tapes that was destroyed by my parents whenever they heard me listening to Smack My Bitch Up. That one didn't go over well.
It didn't go over well with my parents either. They took away a 9 Inch Nails CD.
Oh, I imagine that. Yeah.
But they tried with the Prodigy one. I was like, no.
Yeah, I just got better at hiding my musical taste and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which, I got into hip hop a lot, which of course actually the first tape that I ever bought was the Fat Boys. I don't know if you remember who that is.
I remember them. I never had a CD by them.
Well, it was their tape. Coming Back Hard Again. And that was some pretty raunchy stuff on there, but like that was my introduction into hip hop, which I know that's kind of sad. I did eventually get into Wu-Tang pretty hard past that. But
Coolio was mine.
Yeah. And
I was really upset when I found out that not only did I have the censored version, but the uncensored version had more songs and more content on it.
Yeah, I remember mine. What was it? They sang that song, Abraham Lincoln was a good old man, jumped out the window with his dick in his hand, said to the ladies, I'm doing my duty, so bend the hell over and give me some booty. Who was that? They were like the most raunchy rap.
2 Live Crew?
No, it wasn't 2 Live Crew.
They got arrested for their raunchiness.
Yeah, I don't think it was them. I could be wrong though, but man, God bless my neighbor and his loud stereo, because he turned me on to so much music he has no idea.
Well, whenever like I was younger and would go into the meat room at the restaurant where I met you at, like there would always be a rather eclectic. I got bonkers. Never mind. There would be a rather eclectic music selection that'd be playing. So sometimes I'd go there and it would be like Wagner. Sometimes I'd go there and it'd be Aphex Twin. Sometimes it would be Wu-Tang Clan. Sometimes it would be the local college station. That's really the only radio station I'll listen to in the car because you never know what they're going to play.
Oh yeah, 90.9 in the 90s was one of those things that was like one of the more pivotal influence of music in my life. Like punk, things like that nature. I remember the first song that I ever heard on there was Detachable Penis.
I remember that song.
Yeah, and it was on the radio, and I was just like, what is this treasure, and where is it coming from? And it was 90.9, and at the time, there was a pirate radio station that was being broadcast here. I can't remember what it was called, but it was a couple of people doing that, and like they were playing a lot of non-mainstream music that other people just weren't playing. And it's not like today where it's so easy to get exposure to different types of music, especially when you live in Valdosta of all places. Right. So like the college was really like what opened my ears up to a lot of different types of music, and like just thank God for 90.9. So
I really enjoy it. There's some days they'll have like select programming on there. Mm-hmm. Like, I think like Thursday they call Thor's Day.
Oh yeah.
So it's like 80s and late 70s metal and hard rock. But then I remember back in the day, like on Sunday, it would be like all Western Mexican music. Like it's not just mariachi, but it's like where Oaxaca is at in Mexico, like near Baja, California, but across from the peninsula. Like I worked with folks in New Jersey that were in a band, and like one of them showed me like a concert that they had at their town. I forget the name of it in Jersey, but like there was like 2,000 people. This is just like a Sunday. It's just like what the town did was like they just put on shows, and like at the park, and like 2,000 people would show up, and they would just play this Mexican music with like the accordion like taking the place of like the lead instrument. It was like the accordion's a hard fucking instrument to play. I can't play it worth a shit.
Yeah.
But like they'll rip on it, dude.
That's awesome. It's so hard these days though to find like truly unique sounding music that it, you know, even comes close to the mainstream of where you can discover it. I think like Mindless Self-Indulgence was like one of the last things that I heard, and of course God knows how long that's been, that was like had like a truly like just out there unique sound, and it's just
they were wild. Whenever I think it was like 10th or 11th grade, so it would have been 2000 or 2001, I heard Frankenstein Girls Will Seem Strangely Sexy.
Yeah.
And a couple things that intrigued me about the album is that as far as the order of the songs, the track list was alphabetized. And they had...
I never noticed that.
They had, if I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure, I'd be willing to bet without a lifeline that they had representation for every letter in the alphabet. So there was more than 26 songs on. I think there was 32 on that album, because most of MSI's songs are like, they're pretty short.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's not like I think they and like System of a Down are like their epics are about like 4 or 5 minutes. Like if, you know, otherwise it's like really concise. But my mom of all people had told me she had gone to Atlanta for like an art show one of her students was at, and she had tuned into like whatever, I think it was before Clear Channel bought out 99X, but she was telling me about this band Mindless Self-Indulgence, and could never, like, you know, the local Rock 108 or one, I was not going to play MSI, but Napster happened, and then I heard this song Bitches, and lyrically not really breaking new ground.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's fine. You know, I don't have to have that. Like, I just like the thought that's being put into it. But that whole album, like, there were so many like fucking bangers on that song or that album, and like you said, it was truly, truly unique. But
like,
I think now the really unique stuff is kind of hard to pin down. Now it's which is interesting. I think with music is that the more you try to define it, the less interesting it becomes for me personally.
Well, that's the first thing everybody does to it when they hear it, you know. But
yeah,
they're like, oh, well, I hear the influence of this, or I hear the influence of that, you know. It's like, what's the name of that group? I know I'm going to horribly mispronounce her name. Antwood.
The Answer.
Huh? No, Antwood.
Yeah. I mean, it means the answer.
Oh yeah.
Antwood.
Like, I thought they were, you know, super unique, but then apparently, like, there's like a whole like subgenre of music that comes out of, like, you know, South Africa that's kind of, you know, has some similarities to it in the way that they rap and do things like that. But they made it big. But I still think that they have a very unique sound to them.
The artistic avenue that they take with their imagery, right? Like, it's like their visuals are really good.
Oh yeah,
like their videos are really good. Like there's, I like it whenever I guess it's linked to delayed gratification, but it's like a bigger idea or bigger project. To me, I like that more than the spur of the moment stuff. Now, like the spur of the moment stuff is still beautiful in its own right, but it's just like me personally, I like more of the I guess methodical sort of approach with it. And whenever you have a budget like Diane Ward has, like, good God, like you can not only plan for bigger projects, but you can create microcosms of them. So the big project is now just, we just made a YouTube video.
Yeah. Because
you have $50,000 like sitting around that you can just use really quickly.
Must be nice.
Must be. But like now, it's like, I mean, even they, like, that was like 10 years ago. So I mean, like,
yeah,
like now,
which is crazy because it just doesn't feel like it was that long ago.
Yeah. But now in like 2020, like not only is the world going to change, but I mean, like a lot of my friends that were like musicians, engineers, that like people that toured or were in the show production, like their living's just like, not only is it on hold for 2020, it looks like it's going to like change that industry forever. Right?
Oh, for sure, it definitely is.
So I mean, music, as far as its cultural influence, is not going to be as widespread like it was in the 20th century. As far as direct contact, so concerts, right?
Yeah.
So I think we've kind of been living in a nostalgia of the 20th century.
But so much of popular music ceased to be like an art and just feels more like a product that's being sold to you anyway, you know? So,
which it is.
I mean, it's always kind of been that way in like at least the late 20th century, but
well since all of recording, recorded music has like it's always been designed to be marketable. Now there are things that go into public domain, right? So I mean, you can find Thomas Edison's early gramophone tests of him reciting "Mary Had a Little Lamb," and you don't have to pay for it. But I'm saying for like the broad scope of it, all of recorded music, like there's always been a way for an artist to make money off of it.
yeah.
But it's changed so much now to where like that doesn't have to be the goal of you making your music, but it's still been like that is what it originated from.
I mean, my thing though is just like where they moved it from, where the artist, you know, where there's more art being performed, or at least it looks like that from the outside, from the producer, than the actual artist, you know, because the artist is more or less just another sound that goes on the track for them, like that voice or, you know, that talent or what have you.
Right.
And then they just take that and they incorporate it into everything else they're producing, and then they just put it there. And that's why some of these artists, like, they suck, like mumble rappers. They suck.
Some of it I like.
I mean, I like it. There's things that, I mean, I'm always going to be a slave to the drum. I mean, like, somebody starts beating, I'm gonna nod my head to it, but it doesn't mean that person has any, like, true skill, or there's any, like, real pervasive message in what they're trying to say, you know?
True.
And with, especially in the times that we exist now, there's so much that could be incorporated into music to reach people and change minds, but, you know, the last song that I remember being a catchy tune was "Baby Shark Doo 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 Doo." So, I mean, maybe I'm missing something.
Now that sounds cute. I think.
I mean, can you name one popular song that's
bro,
like?
Bro,
right
I haven't
now?
been able to name one popular anything.
I mean,
in like 15 years.
I know we're old, but I even asked a kid this the other day, and they were just like, "There's some band that people like," but. I mean,
dude, in 1996, I was getting it when I was getting really into music, and that's when I first got a guitar. I was into music that started happening in 1991 and 1992, so I already started 5 years behind the curve with like everything. And like I've never like even like younger like high school bands and whatnot like we weren't doing like emo music or boy band with breakdown music or anything like that. You know what I mean?
I miss the days of bands, so
I like live music. One thing what brings me joy with performing is improvisational stuff. Like I like that. Like where I can just be like, hey man, you guys play whatever. Like, and I'm just gonna sit over here. I'm gonna play along with it, or like I've done this before with my buddy Samson, where we're just hanging out and they're playing music, and I just take out my guitar and I play along with the music. And like initially he like he was being respectful, but he was turning down the music so I could play. I'm like, oh no, dude, like no, don't give me the attention. Turn that shit back up. I'm good.
You just want to be in the flow of the music.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, shit, dude. I've been playing guitar now for 24 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Self-taught. Bonkers. You're messing with it, bro. Stop messing with that.
Don't fuck with the shit, bonkers.
But yeah, so like I find joy in that. Like I don't find joy in like performing like my own stuff like like me and my guitar and like singing. I mean, it's cool, it's whatever, but like I don't enjoy it. I've gigged before. Like I spent like a lot of my 20s gigging, and like I don't like it, man. Like it's like now, like bro, I got a corporate job. You know, I'm 36 years old. I'm happy to have my corporate job, and like I like podcasting. I like making music like for myself that I can add in my my chronology of my life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
That's what drives me with it. It goes back earlier when we were talking about with purposeless or purposelessness, nihilism, right? So the idea of if you find yourself with your life without meaning, without purpose, you got to create one yourself. Like, the universe doesn't owe me shit. It doesn't owe anybody shit. You got to make your own happiness, because life by default is struggle. And that's just default setting. It can get a lot worse, but that's like bare minimum is struggle. So whenever happiness, the opportunity for it presents itself in life, carpe diem, carpe noctem, take advantage of it. You have to choose to be happy whenever it's readily available, because it's not always going to be readily available for you to be happy. Yeah. So same thing with purpose, right? If you don't have purpose, like, you gotta give yourself some purpose. Maybe that's working on building a better relationship with your loved one, your partner, your spouse, whatever. Maybe that's financially motivating yourself to be like, I want to build an empire to leave my lineage. Maybe it's doing something with a hobby with bigger projects, like, you know, painting figurines, or like then moving into building your own figurines. You know, something you can improve upon, though.
Oh yeah, because everybody wants to leave something to be remembered by. You know?
Totally, it's our ego.
So, and that, well, for some people, like what they do is like they consider that they're building on a foundation, you know, for an afterlife too. You know, so I mean, some people are kind because they're, you know, just trying to make sure that they get into heaven and, you know, don't go to hell.
But what are they doing with that kindness, though? Like, that's, you know, because I'm like, I do not, for the record, I do not like religious institutions, because I'm not an ideologue, and like I believe in God. I believe that, like, in the whole idea of humbling thyself before God is it's a good concept to have. You know, again, Pascal's dilemma, right?
Well, why?
But at the same time, the church is an institution of man, and I don't dig it. I don't dig it at all. You should not want to be a good person only in action in order to just appease the bare minimum, right? So, like, I mean, think about the one parable I remember that stuck with me was about a father gave coins or gold to two sons, and one of them buried it so it would be kept safe, and the other one...
That was the servants.
Was it the servants?
Yes, that was 3 servants, yeah.
Okay. So, but at the end, the one who buried their coins was chastised for taking no risk and doing nothing with essentially an opportunity or talents or gifts, whatever it may be. And that always stuck with me. I was like, hey, not everybody thinks like me.
Yeah.
And I don't think like everybody, and everybody is blessed and cursed in different tosses of the dice. So do something with it.
Oh yeah, I mean, because this is not a dress rehearsal. You know? Like,
no sequel.
Yeah.
No proven sequel.
Well, no proven sequel. And that's why I always, like, for me, I've always felt it's like a fairly safe assumption to just, you know, proceed like there's not a sequel, and to live my life as fully and as best I can, you know. Because I hope there is. I sincerely hope there is. That would be so nice, you know, if I could transition into something else. But
I think you just need, now in your middle age, you just need one good healthy dose of psilocybin mushrooms and just sit in the dark by yourself with your thoughts, or maybe you know, outside, you know, in the wilderness.
But
camping.
even still, all the things that occur, like, you know, with psilocybin and all like that, it all occurs within that organic matter that sits inside your skull, and, you know, a delusion generator that we call a brain. And
true, but
how much can you trust it at any given moment?
Well, here's that's a good question. Here's how I'll counter that. So the process that it does, it's something that's readily available in nature, right? So that means it's not only is it readily available in the program, but it's potentially bountiful and endless as well, right? The fungus. So while you're talking about, it's just part of this process that goes on in our brain. There's nothing necessarily cosmic about that. It's natural, right? It allows us, by widening the bandwidth of our perception, in order to perceive more reality that is omnipresent. That's always going on around us.
Oh, trust me, I've sat on LSD thinking I was God a couple of times. Because I closed my eyes and those geometric shapes just appeared out of nowhere, and I was like, I am God.
LSD, I've never seen forms and figures, entities come through. Mushrooms, DMT, there's been things like things that they're like me and they're not like me. You know what I mean? And I remember being on mushroom trips before, and a face will appear out of the void, for lack of a better term, and it is there and it recognizes me and it is giving me a message, and I'm able to receive this message. And it's weird that it's something that's always here. It's going on right now in this room, all around us. And so for lack of a better term of what I can call this, it's a representation of God, right? So these could potentially be demigods. So we ourselves, I think some schools of Satanism tie in with this. We're mortal gods, right? So we're kind of stuck in this inertial plane to where positive and negative are equally distributed. So I would think that we would have to
So you're saying that we're like demigods in our existence on this plane of existence, more as a school of organics, I guess. This is where organic biological programs. Yeah, so this is where we come here to experience this level of existence.
I think it could be multifaceted, but that would be one facet of it. Yes. I think that notion also ties in with archaic religions, and I find the old world stuff truly fascinating. But with reincarnation, and that you have to.
That's what I'm hoping for, man.
You have to earn your way out. You either choose to come back here, or you are damned to come back here to get yourself out, or you're at a lower vibrational point, and now you're back here at neutral.
Yeah.
So now, if you do nothing, then I believe you will be recycled back. And
that sounds great. That's the school of thought I've always wanted. I've always been the most enamored by, is that where there isn't a heaven. You just get to come back and experience life through so many different things. Because we, like you was talking about earlier, with being humble to God. If there's one thing that's never sat well with me, is what I was told is that one day I would die, and that I would go to heaven, and then I would get to spend eternity worshiping God. And I don't know who that sounds more lame for me or for God. Because
for God,
I just sit there and I imagine God, and or imagine anybody. Let's say we're going to put you on a stage, and we are going to clap about how awesome you are. How fucking long would it take before you got tired of that clapping and people saying you're so fucking awesome, Colt?
Less than 10 seconds.
Yeah, but realistically, even if you can measure that into, extrapolate that out into a couple of years. Well, we're talking about a God, or at least in the Christian sense, an omnipotent God that is constantly being worshipped by people on this planet. There's at least, as we speak, probably a cool billion people right now praying to him in some form or fashion, and according to them, he hears all of them all at once, not to mention, the whatever umpteen billion people that he's got in heaven who are in this heavenly choir, and they're all just cheering him on too. And he's just sitting there thinking, yes, I love this. I've been doing this for billions of years. It's awesome. It's I almost guarantee you that God probably finds rocks more interesting than he does people. Because a rock you could watch from his perspective over the timeline of 1 billion years, and he can watch he can see it at, like the
As opposed to a
subatomic
bubble
level.
pop of our
Yeah,
existence.
and our existence is plop. Like, he doesn't give a shit about you praying for that new car. He doesn't care. I'm telling you, he's off on some other shit that's way more interesting than you. But that's just me.
I would argue that the prime creator, right? The monad, the one entity, like everything it came from. Yeah, I believe was it the deists that postulate that it would have been, all right, I've set it in motion, created it. Y'all are on your own.
Well, that's what I've always thought too, because
But
how much free will?
Hold on. To your point, though, I agree with you as far as like the omni worship aspect of it. Think about it. Does God really want you to spend all your time here on earth doing nothing but groveling and worshiping? No, that's not going to get anything done. It's not going to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
You're not going to be prosperous and live a long time. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to elevate your etheric body. You're just going to be like, okay, well, Gerald, just get back in there. Try again, man. Do something. Yeah. It's like, you're right, Lord. I'm gonna throw myself at your mercy again. Like that's like the Calvinists argument, where it's just like, oh no, there is no choice. Everything's been predetermined. Yeah. It's like including the sentence you just said.
Well, that's the argument of like free will, is just like, how can God be omnipotent and have free will at the same time if he already knows everything in the
Omniscient.
future? Yeah, and in perfect detail. And if God doesn't have free will, then it's impossible for you to have free will, because everything that you're going to do has been, predetermined.
Right.
But God could easily, the argument there is that, God could elect to just not see the future if he wanted to. But if he ever saw it even once, wouldn't he know it forever?
Well, I think it's the idea of a hierarchy again, right? Like, so if it's the idea of this monad, I think in a certain sects of Hindu, and I don't know jack shit about Hinduism, just to clarify, but the supreme personality is this four-faced entity that represents the four personality types, right? So I would imagine then from that you would go back to these demigods. It's like, well, yeah, the guy who made the whole thing doesn't have time to run all this shit, so you have all of these lesser gods. So you would have, from that monad, you would have two, right? And then,
well, that's like the Romans. Like, I mean, at least the Roman gods, like they made no pretense of knowing everything that was going on.
No,
like
it was zodiacal.
Yeah, it was like Days of Our Lives. It was a hot damn mess. Like, these people, like, they were warring with each other. Zeus didn't see this coming. So there wasn't anything there. But the thing is like it's just frustrating that people think that they put this persona on God, this being that's existed, since the beginning of time, and how I'm more capable of emotional growth within, my such and such years on Earth, and he still gets pissed off if he catches you masturbating. Like, he doesn't have a sense of humor, you know?
I was going to save your granddad when I saw you were beating your dick last night.
Yeah,
spilled the seed. I told you not to spill a drop of it.
I'm convinced that he has to have a wonderful sense of humor, like an absolutely wonderful sense of humor.
Oh, absolutely. And at the same time, there'll be a part of it that's just a grizzly bear, like unforgiving, does not care at the slightest.
Or after an existence as long as his, he could be just slap fucking crazy. I mean, I don't think you could discount that.
Do you think? I know it's not impossible for you or I, but do you think that a lot of folks can't get past the notion of where they've anthropomorphized, say, the idea of Jesus or God or Allah to human characteristics, when like ancient religion was about the heavens, and the sun worship was almost a universal practice of it, because everything was better with the sun. Like, everything was better. So you still had the gods above and the wandering stars that, the calendars, the 7-day week calendar was in homage to the 7 wandering stars. We call them planets. I don't think they're planets, but like they're they're gas giants. But anywho, like this notion of like of Jesus combines archetypes of Julius Caesar in with these cosmic alignments, kind of like astrotheology talks about, where Jesus is the Son of God, but the literal Son, our Son. And in order to transcend, you have to vibrate in harmonious fashion your magnetic ethereal body with the sun, so it will allow you to go through. The lower vibrational one, wormhole, I guess, would be the moon that you would traverse through. And it ties in with the yin and yang concept of this dichotomy as well, as a way to get out of the matrix.
Well, they didn't talk about that in Sunday school, so I can't really.
But I mean, yeah, if you think about it, because that's even like hardline atheists, they'll attack the historical accuracy / inaccuracy of Jesus of Nazareth, right? And start to poke holes in it.
Well, it's easy to poke holes at the Bible and how the Bible like came to be formed, and like the Council of Nicaea, and the arguments that took place in order for what we know as the New Testament to be what it is. Now the Torah that's a little bit different because that's a bit older, but even then that relied mostly on people just memorizing and repeating it, but of course that was much different back then because people that's how they moved information, was by memorizing what they heard and replaying it back to somebody else.
Well, even the Torah, if I'm not mistaken, it still took not to be disrespectful to any old world individuals, but the mythologies of 3 different religions.
Like Zoroastra.
The one of them was tied with El, the god El. But there were two others, but that was the first. This ancient group of Israelites, that was like the first attempt to move towards monotheism. Was taking these 3 and associating them as oneness. So a trinity, if you will.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, there's still there's still authority that dictated what was quote unquote godly and what was a conspiracy.
It was
right?
It was the Roman Empire, and I mean there was lots of things that were just blatantly left out. They had all of these groups, literally thousands of people from all across what was considered the Christendom, and they come and they have this thing, and some of it was just completely thrown out. Like whole books and stuff like that. We're not talking like 5 or 6. We're talking like hundreds and thousands.
Yeah, the Apocrypha.
Yeah.
Or Apocrypha, however you pronounce it. But like the Book of Enoch. Like the Book of Enoch is like some Tolkien wild shit, and the Vatican tossed it out along with I think the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Thomas,
and the Apocalypse of Peter, which actually was going to be the last book of the Bible instead of Revelations. But one of the things that they found so trying about that is that basically that when people died who went to hell, that the saints in heaven would pray and pray and pray because these are their loved ones and stuff like that are in hell. And they wanted them out because they obviously didn't want them to suffer anymore. So they would pray for them, and then God would eventually open the gates of hell and allow all of the sinners into heaven. And you don't have nearly as much room for control over a populace whenever, you might go to hell, but you'll get out eventually.
Yeah, if it's not necessarily decided, but a potential a swing state is in the transcendent realm.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So that, but I mean that ties in with old world, like particularly old American religion, like shamanism. So like with me, like I'm sure it comes as no shock to you, but like I've tied that into having a significant religious impact on my life is the idea of I guess neo-shamanism or Christian shamanism, whatever you want to call it, where it the idea of the Christ mind and elevating oneself and being not just kind but like wanting other people to benefit even if you cannot. You know what I mean? A sacrifice for somebody else's benefit, like benevolence. These are charitable things, and tying that in with the idea of I've never done ayahuasca, but supposedly whenever you have a formidable trip of it, whenever you blast off, again, a DMT or salvia or even strong doses of psilocybin, you go off into the stars, like to the realm where your soul goes, like after your machine, your body dies, and it goes to be judged. And like, I think it's interesting that the character of Jesus, I don't necessarily believe in the historical version of Jesus, so that makes me a heretic as far as Christian churches go by default. However,
by humanity's like the ideologue's way of judging you.
Yeah,
I've long since abandoned those.
But like notions of like what psychedelics and even conspiracy theories have brought to me as an adult, plus almost drowning and having other traumatic experiences, is that like I believe it is real, not Israel, the country. I believe that it, as in God, is real. It is an actuality, and I do believe that there is more to our existence other than just this biological thing that we're in. Notwithstanding, I do agree with you that our time is short here. There is no guarantee of any of this. It is my ego that is conjuring this up.
Well, it's just you.
But at the same time, like I've unpacked a lot of ideas, and I think from softening or decalcifying my pineal gland over like a decade plus has given me insight. And like most people that have psychedelic experiences, like they have a lot more insight usually than folks that have not. And that's not to say that they're right about this insight or that they are somehow enlightened, because like you can just be easily as fooled, just be like I just saw pretty colors and geometric shapes. And
I don't trust my mind at all. Like I totally believe that it's I know that it wants to be comforted at all times. Like it's constantly seeking comfort, And
speaking of comfort, do you mind if we pause real quick? I gotta fucking pee.
Yeah. Stuff out.
Either that or you can keep talking to yourself.
Anybody want to hear a song?
Cool. Sorry about that. Seeking comfort.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck I was talking about. I mean, we know our mind, what we was talking about earlier.
Well, we were talking about God and psychedelia connecting, and also still being skeptical and saying that the mind seeks comfort.
Well, my thing is just I can subscribe to just about any thought for a very limited time. It just has never seemed to serve me well to hold on to anything as a solid, belief structure.
The only thing I know for sure is that one day I'm going to die.
Yeah, and well, my body's just, it's there's gonna be small fuck ups in my body that lead to big fuck ups in my body, and one of these days I'm going to be, it could of course happen just, randomly, a refrigerator could fall on me from the sky and I'd just die instantly and have no idea what happened, or I'm going to, have a slow, long, painful, death where I have all the time in the world to prepare for this moment that I've known was coming my entire life, that was keeping me awake in my 20s, but here I am in my 80s, thank God, but that's why, you should do your best to live a good life, be an honest person, do well to your neighbor. That's like you said, like I'm not like what I would call I don't necessarily believe in Jesus the person, but it's easy to believe in the teachings of Jesus,
Right.
But it's the same with like so many other schools of thought and words of wisdom that you've heard over the years. You can take the wisdom and knowledge from that and apply it to your life, but if I don't say that I follow the religion exactly this way, and I don't pray exactly this way, and I don't masturbate, that I'm guaranteed to make it to this better place. It's just, I don't know, it's just hard for me to subscribe to that. And I often wonder how people so wholeheartedly do, but I think for a lot of people it's easier just to be like, it's like a box that they check, and they're just like, okay, I think this. I don't have to think about anything deeper, pondering anymore, because I've got it all sorted out, and now on to working on my relationship and, making money and, all this jazz. So,
well, it's you bring your worldview into question whenever you start asking bigger questions.
Oh yeah, people don't like to have be like we was talking about earlier, like an uncomfortable mind is not a pleasant experience. Rather it be that you're dealing with somebody who died in your family, or heartbreak, but much less an existential crisis where you just don't know where to put your faith and existence in, and that can be very troubling, for some people. But you're gonna die one day anyway, so you might as well just get over that fear as early as you can.
It's kind of like I don't know. I like, whenever I have kids, I don't want to. I'm going to have to indoctrinate them somehow, in some ways. But what I don't want to do is to put them into some sort of psychological circumstance to where nihilism or even blind ideological faith paints themselves into a corner to where they can't grow spiritually or work their way through the world.
I would hate to think that I would have to raise my children in the same manner that I was raised, where it was fear-based propaganda, that whereas like if you don't do this, there's an eternity of this waiting for you. Like I want my children to choose to be good people, free of repercussions of something
well,
bad.
Because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. And that's the thing, because I remember when I was a kid, like at our church, they would show us these videos about the rapture. And like, if you don't accept Jesus, we're literally going to chop your fucking head off with a guillotine. Let me tell you something, man. When my 10-year-old self saw that, and that movie stopped playing, and that preacher got up there and said, all right, if you guys want to make sure that you make it into heaven, you'll come up to this altar and you'll accept Jesus as your Lord and personal Savior right now. I was on that fucking altar so quick, crying my eyes out. Please, God, please save me. And I even remember for days and months after that, like, it's all I thought about is just like, I would do something that I didn't think was good, and I was like, I've got to ask for forgiveness right now. And I can't even fathom living in that kind of fear now. And the fact that there's people who are my age and older who still live encapsulated in that type of fear, that if they do anything slightly askew from the biblical teachings, that they're going to suffer an eternity in hell. And it's just mind-blowing to me. It's like, how can you live like that? You have a totally different existence than I do.
Well, you're living out of fear.
Yeah.
And like that's not to sound like too bohemian or whatnot, but that's a low vibrational way to live.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there's gonna be plenty of times for you to be scared shitless in life, and I don't think that that's how cosmically you should operate. You know what I mean? Like, same thing with like the idea of like worshiping all the time, or like that God would want, like, heaven's like, oh, you go there and then everybody just worships God all the time. It's like, man, that doesn't seem logical. Don't you think there'd be like higher levels of more shit to do, where it's like, okay, look, we've got some sort of purple sky above us. We don't know what the fuck is going on up there, but we can see Earth and everything below us. Mm-hmm. And like, because Earth is tied to the third dimension, right? So like there has to be higher dimensions. Mm-hmm. They've been able to theorize, 10 dimensions? Mm-hmm. So I mean, it would make more sense to me that, like, because we're limited three-dimensionally with this our bodies, this biological machine, that there's not going to be like this notion of like which church is correct and how to worship God the best if you're already on the positive spectrum of it. You
That's
know what
also
I mean?
Like the question is like, what is even good and evil? Like, I mean, like,
And
right,
it's
Hitler for us, it's easy for us to say that he's evil, which, I mean, in my opinion, he is. But this is just totally a free style thought. But there, you know, we have good, we have evil, and how we see it, which is basically a reflection of how society benefits or doesn't benefit from it. You know, the same as like we're always looking, you know, for safety, shelter, and food. Like those are our biological needs, and whenever society is stable, then that is better for those needs that we have. You know, we can reproduce, we can have shelter, we can feed ourselves, and feel secure, and that's great. But you know, whenever you apply that to like a killer whale, like playing, you know, with a seal before he eats it, like is it evil what he's doing? I mean, does he have any concept of good and evil? Does the frog that eats mosquitoes that fly by all day, I mean, of course we know he's just feeding himself, so I mean it's within his nature. But a reflection of humanity seems to show that we also have a violent nature. And for us to say that it's good or bad, I mean, it makes sense because it affects how, you know, we are. But like for any being that's higher than us, like you say, a multi-dimensional being who doesn't have those.
Well, we're multi-dimensional.
Well, I'm just saying, but like somebody who obviously, like, you know, like
something
a
that doesn't operate in the third dimension.
We'll say God for all intents and purposes, where he doesn't have the concerns of, you know, safety and reproduction, you know, the basic things that we have, because, you know, he exists beyond all of that. Like, does he even care what good or bad is in comparison to what we need for ourselves?
Let me. That's a good point. Let me ask you this. Okay, so this notion of we are our own gods, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's this old, I guess you call it a religion. It ties in with like your chakra points, right? So you have 7 of them in you. And that it ties in with an old Hindu cosmology where there are these biospheres that are these planets that are, it's a flat mandala inside of this sphere that is aligned in a giant being, a giant God-like being, mm-hmm. and we're inside of it. Do you think that we are that own, like, your own being, and like you're inside of your own Earth right now?
Well, I mean, you could just as easily. I mean, I guess what you're saying is like, my body is clearly a microcosm of all kinds of things, of cells, and you know, and I'm sure you've seen the pictures where like they show you like galaxies and how it favors like different anatomical parts of a human body or things of that nature. And I mean, yeah, I mean, we could totally be part of it. And there was actually a book I read. It's by Scott Adams called God's Debris, and like,
love that book.
And basically,
you got me onto that book.
Yeah, and basically the theory of that book is that you have this omnipotent God who knows everything that there is, except the
omniscient. Omnipotent is all powerful.
Yeah, and
nerd, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're fine. And what's the one thing that a God that knows everything wouldn't know? And basically the premise is that God wouldn't know what existed on the other side of him not existing. So him being, this all-powerful being basically commits suicide. And that's like the moment of the Big Bang. And like we're just all scattered across the universe, and everything that, we see like as a human population, like we're always about networking and putting things together, and like we're growing, more and more cohesive with the internet and all this stuff. And like if somebody from a different, let's say like planet was to view us in like 1 million years, assuming we don't destroy ourselves, would you not be able to tell that, the planet Earth was just one sentient being, because we're like brain cells building ourselves back together, and we're God rebuilding himself. And which, I mean, I'm not so certain that I subscribe to that school of thought, but it's a really interesting thought experiment, So
I like the book itself. It kind of reminded me of The Prophet, Khalil Gibran
mm-hmm.
talked about it, where it's a short book. I think The Prophet's a dude on a hill that it's about to go on a journey. I could be wrong, but I think that's the idea of it. And it's just people are asking him questions and all this. And in God's Debris, it's a guy delivering a package.
Yeah.
And the guy asks him to come inside, and it's this older fellow sitting at a chair. And the guy is all business as usual first, and then he gradually sits down and starts talking with him and whatnot. Same guy who Dilbert.
Makes the Dilbert comics. But there's a lot of logical flaws in that book as you read it. Like, I won't delve into it. If anybody's listening, and if you ever get a chance, read God's Debris. It's really, really interesting. It's insightful. But
the notion of God committing suicide in order to learn what is the only thing that could not be known, and by that it's God's debris. Yeah.
And then, of course, I mean, but like when you think about it, like if there was like an omnipotent being, like that might be the one thing that he doesn't know, and and he knew that he would like eventually rebuild himself, and then he would know what that absence of his existence was, and we're all part of that putting him back together. But that doesn't really say much for an afterlife.
It also, I don't know how that would tie in with if all this is already created, right? And then if all this is already created and then God commits suicide, and then thereby like what? Like, is the world destroyed as well? Or is it just because God operates outside of time that if we're on a cellular level God's debris, then would the world, like, are we just slowly dying, or have we like recycled again? You know what I mean? Like, it could tie in with that notion of if a world has some sort of quantum shadow and it switches from one existence to another, like we're in a parallel universe.
Oh yeah, well, that's like the multiverse theory and string theory and all that, how we're all interconnected and tied together. There's some very interesting stuff there. I've actually got a book I'd have to bring to you. I can't think of it off the top of my head because it has an extraordinarily boring title, but there's a couple of chapters in there. It's really long. I can't even pronounce some of the words in it, but it's actually kind of, it's above my collegiate level of reading. But some of the stuff in there is a little bit more laid out in layman's terms, and I think you would enjoy it.
Does it have pictures to go with the words?
There are a couple of diagrams.
That helps me.
But some of them are like, it's like there's a lot of math in it. And I was just, when I picked up the book, I was so arrogant. I was like, I'm going to read the shit out of this. And then, it's a dense book.
My buddy Mike Price lent me a book about kind of decoding or unlocking the Mayan calendar. I was like, wow, this sounds really interesting. I understand like 5% of what that book is talking about.
Yeah.
Like, it's so over my
Sometimes
head.
that's good though, because like you just can't read the book through. You kind of have to read, and then you're like, okay, I don't understand exactly what this concept is, and then I go and I read up on that concept and get a better understanding. But some of that stuff that, especially when you start involving like a lot of math, I mean, some of the math is just beyond me. So that's the stuff for physicists and things of that nature. But
some things like arithmetic, so like arithmetic operations, like I can latch on to that pretty easily. Like I do well with numbers, but when you start talking about like ratios and like conversions and stuff like that, you do not want me being in charge of giving you the numbers.
Yeah.
I can work with the data, but like as far as like figuring the rest of that out, nah.
My mental gifts do not
Well,
live in the realm of mathematical equations. So.
I'm so out of practice with it, bro. It's like I had trig when I was 17. I did really well with it. My grade didn't reflect it, but as far as like the concept of it, like I understood, and like because it was tied in like philosophy with mathematics. I thought that was really fascinating, And this was before I'd ever had a philosophy class, but. Like I can't remember. Like I have no mental muscle memory of the mathematics.
Yeah,
it's a good alliteration.
Bravo!
You want a bottle of water?
No, man, I'm straight.
All right. So you're wearing a NASA shirt.
I did not even think about that when I put that on.
One of my.
That's what my fiance meant when she said you're wearing that shirt.
So,
yeah.
One of my favorite experiences of us going out to the nightlife was, God, it was probably like 2 or 3 years ago. No, it wouldn't have been 3 years ago, but it was like 2 years ago. We went out, and you were wearing your NASA shirt, and I was wearing my NASA Lies shirt. And
I've actually seen a few of those shirts around.
That's what's up. Good. What do you think about the alien stuff that like the Pentagon talking about those UFO crafts, and that they're made of materials off world, not of this reality?
I find that stuff really interesting. I have to admit that I'm probably on board with. I don't think most of the population could handle knowing that. But if given the option, I would release the information, despite my reservations. But I don't know. I think it's interesting. Of course, it's one of those things that I'm sure you were like, yeah, look, the government said that something wasn't around anymore, and there it was. Well, there you go.
2020 has been interesting because like a lot of people, I think, finally have something clicked in them where the idea of like conspiracies, they realize that it's multi-genred, right? So like notions of like Bigfoot, UFOs, aliens, these are 3 types of conspiracies. But I mean, so is like Flat Earth and Pedogate and 9/11 and like weather engineering. Like it's multifaceted. So like with people that are already used to talking about the unknown and skepticism or neo-skepticism, e.g. yourself, that it's not as much of a challenge as it is for other people, So 2020 has kind of been interesting because I've had a fair amount of people. Some of them I would not have suspected would kind of wake up, and some of them just certain things they woke up to, and other things they'll still they'll ridicule me for. But I mean, in a playful manner. But they're listening with other stuff. So like I like that. But long tangent. But do you think it's more of a plausibility that these are from some sort of planet in outer space or galaxy, or that these are things that are already here, and like ties in with more with like the hollow Earth or inner Earth theory, or beings that like they've been here longer than we know, and that knowledge of them has been lost?
I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't already people or things from somewhere else that have been here. My first question is why stay? I mean, unless they're just not capable of like truly interstellar travel, like if it's something that took, like they boarded their ship like 100 years ago and it took them that long to get here, which was more than a generation for their species or whatever, then yeah, they might not have been so inclined to, go back to where they were from after they came here, and maybe we were the first thing they came across. I mean, there's a ton of variables as to why. Of course, I don't subscribe to the hollow Earth theory.
Why is that?
Because it just doesn't seem possible to me. I was first exposed to this by this crazy old man when I lived on that island I told you about. And he used to walk around with a pitchfork. And of course, he was butt fucking crazy, like just off the rip in several different ways. And
why does he have a pitch? I've been to that island. Why did he have a pitchfork?
Well, strangely enough, like for fish, and I don't really know because like I guess he might have been fishing with it, but this was like I just know I was on the middle of this pier at like midnight by myself, and like bear in mind this is a very remote place where there's no other people around.
There's no roads, and there's no bridges to get to the island.
And like this guy comes walking down, and he's super creepy, and like he's got a pitchfork. And either which way, scared shit. I mean, totally stupid story, but
hollowed Earth.
Yeah, and I have his book somewhere. I just cannot find it because I want to give it to you so badly. But it's not even a book. It's like a folder of all these things, and it's like pictures, where there's like these holes that go into the earth, and like these accounts from some people who say that it's a hollow earth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, personally, I haven't seen anything that leads me to believe, like, I think this is more plausible than people think it is. I haven't been swayed on that whatsoever. All I've seen is the realm of mythology and personal account with Hollow Earth. So, but all I've seen with alien stuff, most of it's just been programming from Hollywood through CIA budget money. This whole notion of like coming from the stars and other galaxies, I do not buy that. I think that these things are already here. I think that some of the idea of like USO or UWAP, underwater aerial phenomena. I think that because we don't know squat about our own planet. Like we don't know shit about our own planet. We've only explored like something like a quarter of like the entire planet. And even like on land, there's like in the Amazon, there's an entire area the size of India that we haven't even explored yet.
Yeah.
So I mean,
if you're right though, that's a lot. If like they do live amongst us, that's a scarier scenario than just visiting.
I think who was it? It was in the 1940s. They found some cast or something in a riverbed in the Amazon. They opened it up and it was old documents, not the Dead Sea Scrolls, but it was something else that talked about these jinn, or these demons, these archons, these, for lack of better terms, aliens, that they can't do anything in our realm to create something, right? But they can distort and twist and manipulate what's already here. So I wonder if like some like ancient Mediterranean civilization cult, like before this this flood that would have happened, wiped out most of the Western world, if they tapped into something that had this sort of alien technology, right? And then once it's made, these aliens could manipulate it. I have no data to back this up, but I think that the idea of whatever it may be, of it already being here, yeah, it's a little more terrifying than coming from space, but I believe that it's more plausible than them coming from outer space.
Well, I mean, within the question is like, do they have good intentions for us or bad intentions for us? So, and I think that's where you'll find like a lot of those schools of thought like differ, right? I think most people err to the side that there's something bad, but it's just like, well, what are they waiting for? So
what if they can't? What if they can't take over anything directly? You know what I mean?
So then their point is just to observe.
Well, I guess the point would be to unify all of humanity under something, either by force of a military or a religion or something, and then you can have control, right? Because I think that's what an alien would be control.
I mean, you just got to take away food and water and you'll get that.
But then not if they need people? If they still need people and they still need resources, I mean, it does beg the question, like, well, what do they want? Maybe it's something like clearly I can't comprehend it, But I wonder if like it's something that like most people can't even comprehend.
Yeah.
Or maybe like nobody even really fucking knows, and it's just this phenomena.
Or maybe they're just voyeuristic.
Maybe. Maybe
we were just like their television for them. But I mean, that's why I say like there's just so many different variables that could exist with that that quite frankly just go beyond what we would know. Because like as a private investigator, I believe literally none of what I hear and about half of what I see. I'm even skeptical about the things that I see, because sometimes just because you see something doesn't actually mean you're seeing it in the context that it deserves. Yeah. So,
man, one of the wildest things I've seen out in the woods, and I'm an indoor cat, so I haven't spent a lot of time out in the woods. But when I was younger, I was at a fishing hole with my brother and heard this rather large splash in the water. And I thought it was a gator, so I'm reeling my stomach because I'm like, oh, I'm getting away from the fucking shoreline. So the gator just jumped in the water. And then I see this thing walking across the water. It's like 6 feet above the water. And I'm like, oh my God, what the fuck is that? It's a fucking snake. Mm-hmm. It's a snake that rears itself up and it's moving like a giant S and just like undulating. I guess that's the verb, the gerund I'm looking for. But and it just starts propelling itself, and it's like I shit you not, 6 feet off the water, and like it's going like parallel from me across the horizon, further off into the lake, into the wilderness. And I'm like, oh my God, like, I've never seen something so horrifying and beautiful at the same time. But like my brain couldn't process it at first because I had never seen it. It was kind of like the first time I was little, I saw two adults making out like heavily. I was like, oh my God, like what are they doing? Like, they're like sucking each other's face. It was like foreign to me. I couldn't process it.
Yeah, I really struggled the first time I had a French kiss a girl. I was like, spit involved? If it's not mine? That's gross. My little mind exploded until I did it, and I was just like, oh. Spit's not so bad.
Game changer.
Sorry, I know that was completely off topic. But spit.
But I don't know. I think that if travel to space is possible, right? I think the idea of a Stargate or folding time-space is the logical way to do it, not a combustion engine. I don't think we can get past our atmosphere with a combustion engine. I don't think it's possible.
No, I agree. Like, there's going to be, I think, in the future, some kind of breakthrough in our understanding of the quantum realm, and some way, somehow, like, that's going to play into folding up space, like in Dune.
Yeah.
And maybe that'll get us there, but
I think we already have it. I think the government, some branch of it, that is somewhere in that, not to undermine the concept of the deep state, but somewhere in the deep military and intelligence complex where they have joint operations that are covert. I think that they have stumbled on this, and I think that they, in part, stumbled on it through research that was done through the Nazi scientists.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Through and then Operation Paperclip, which then you have within a decade later, you have NASA and the CIA are brought up, and then like we become a real powerhouse because we're from what buddies of mine that are high up in the military have told me, we're about 10 years advanced militaristically and scientifically speaking past every other country that exists.
Oh yeah, we definitely the top dogs. But sometimes I just wonder just
hot
how
dogs. What?
Top dogs. But sometimes, and of course, this is just the skeptic in me speaking. Is like I do actually tend to lean more towards that we just have things in our arsenal that's just completely beyond comprehension. But at the same time, I'm like, well, maybe we don't. And we would just like to think we do. Of course, we still might have a good stretch before we make those like real limits. Like is anti-gravity devices at some point is that even a possibility? Can mankind figure that out?
I don't think gravity is what we think it is.
But you know what I'm saying? Something
I do know what you're saying. I think that's the right track as far as the progress of true technology, right?
Yeah.
And true transcendence as far as living on Earth and what science can do. But I think that I think these just the modern concept of like space travel, combustion, rocket goes up, meets with the ISS. Like the ISS can exist just by putting some sort of space station on balloons, like a satellite. Like you can YouTube satellites on balloons, and you can see where like they'll just send them up to a certain spot in the sky. And what I imagine is, I'll not be too controversial. Our moon's orbit around the Earth is that they can put it in that magnetic field in the ether with just balloons, right? And once it gets in there, it's whoop. Yeah. It's going around the Earth. So I don't think that combustion is the way to go. I think folding space-time is the important thing. Speaking of moon's orbit, this was, I guess, maybe the past year or two. You see where now scientists that are not they're not heretics or anything, but they're starting to reach a mainstream consensus of the moon may actually be quote-unquote shock to me, much closer and within Earth's atmosphere.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that.
That because the modern notion is that it's 732,000 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you look at no disrespect to your shirt, but if you look at the Apollo program and the hoaxes that the Apollo program pulled off for PR, like for control over information, right? Back in the day, it's Cold War. That's just how they operated. It makes a lot more sense to me that where they say now that we can't get past the Van Allen radiation belt. So if they are going to stick to the story that they landed on the moon during the Apollo program, then you would have to say that the moon is a lot closer to Earth and is a lot smaller and within our own atmosphere. Because if you use a globular or an internal flat planed Earth, no matter which way you look at it, there has to be some sort of partition from the vacuum of space. That would be the Van Allen radiation belt or a firmament or whatever cosmology system you want to use. There's going to be that barrier there. So in order to get to the moon would have to be inside of that barrier.
Well, it'd be a lot more convenient for setting up bases on there.
I don't think we can. There's an old NASA scientist before the Apollo program. He was with Mercury, if I'm not mistaken. He and his team thought that the moon was a new type of plasmid body that emitted its own light, and that it was not solidified. It looks solid, but it's not. It's a weird type of plasmid, and that what we see is the craters that are on it are they're not. It's not like a topography that we understand or can understand. It's something new altogether, and that it was really exciting for them to be able to have such an up close and personal look about obtaining the knowledge of what the moon is made of. So even the Russian space program, they fired stuff at the moon, and like it rang hollow, like it had like
I've actually heard about that.
Struts were in it, and like how the fuck does that happen if it's, you know what I mean? So like, I think that God bless YouTube. A lot of people hate on it because they're like, oh, you learn stuff from YouTube. It's like, bro, I learned how to do projects around the house and on my car, like maintenance stuff from YouTube as well.
Oh, man, let me tell you. YouTube's been a lifesaver for me. I have fixed dryers, dishwashers, lawnmowers, because I could literally go to the exact type of product that I had to the T. It's the exact same thing, and they're like, yeah, this is how you do this. Like, there's some guy, that's his channel. He just records himself fixing everything.
Yeah, they're educators. Like they can't get a work teaching, right? And plus, if you think about it, you can reach a lot more people with the YouTube channel than you can with a classroom. A lot more.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Especially over time, and it doesn't matter how big your classroom is. Like, there's some folks that are on there with their YouTube channels where just after like 15 years of it, they now reach like over 1 million people. They're not celebrities, but on YouTube, like.
But it's all a matter of like how you choose to use that technology. Like, me and you see the internet as this wonderful source that's of never-ending knowledge and enlightenment where you can constantly, look and see things. Whereas there's some people who like just use it to watch fight videos all day, every day, or
which I equate that to pornography, because it like honestly, while it may not be sexually gratifying for some people, it numbs the brain. You know what I mean? It doesn't do anything. But I also think that like both of us are skeptics in our own right. You know what I mean? And don't agree with each other. But I mean, we agree. I'd say like at least 25% of the time on like what we're talking about. But
I'd give us more than that. I mean, but just in our basic life philosophies and stuff like that. It's just whenever you get into the details where We vary, and isn't that the way that it is with everyone?
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, it encourages a dialogue, right? It's the only way you can share ideas. Like, I don't want to be in a fucking echo chamber. How boring is that, man?
Oh yeah, it's definitely boring.
I mean, I rebelled against the church already, and like I certainly rebelled against culture once or twice. So
I love hearing people say things I don't agree with. I'm not an argumentative person, so I don't really care if you think the way that you do or you don't, as long as your beliefs don't intersect with the way I live my life, and
yeah, don't tell me what to do.
Yeah,
don't tell me what I can or cannot do.
Now, unless your way of life happens to benefit me in some way, and I just haven't thought about that shit, and then I see a benefit to it, then fuck yeah, I'm all about that bitch.
I think the most prosperous philosophy and way to live your life is to pursue happiness and encourage others to do the same and protect people from anybody that tries to infringe on that right.
Yeah. As long as you ain't trying to push me off my path of enlightenment, I'm not going to push you off yours.
So when was it? Hang on. When was it that I guess you first started rebelling against religious institutions?
Oh, I was about 16 years old. My parents bought a biblical encyclopedia. Up until then, I took every single thing that I'd ever been told to heart. Everything that I took my parents' word on everything. It was just like
even Santa Claus.
Well, no, I mean I eventually came to terms with that wasn't real, but that didn't take long to figure out. But they got me this encyclopedia, and so I was looking at it, and it was all this cool archaeological stuff. And at the time, that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be an archaeologist. I wanted to unearth the past. And I'm sitting there looking through the encyclopedia, and I'm like, well, I wonder, how the Bible got started, and like, when did the Bible come out? And so, of course, I go and I go to the very first book, and it just starts about Adam and Eve, and goes through Genesis and stuff like that. And I flipped through, and I was like, this is basically just a detailed version of what was happening at this point in time in the Bible. So it wasn't giving me any kind of an origin story outside of the stories inside the book when I wanted to know what the origin of the book was.
Right.
So I went down to the library and told the librarian what I was trying to figure out, and she's like, why are you trying to figure that out? I was like, because I just want to know who wrote the Bible. She's like, well, God wrote the Bible. I was like, yeah, but like, when did it become the Bible? Like, when people could get their hands on it and like actually have it. Like, what's that story? And she pointed me in the direction of some books, and they were not helpful in the least bit. And then I just kind of wandered around with it till I was probably almost 18 years old. And then I was like started reading. This book is called Who Wrote the New Testament, and then it started talking about the Nicene Council and how like the New Testament came and the kind of people who wrote the New Testament and the time period after which the events in the Bible occurred, that these were actually committed to writing, and the whole argument that came to the canonization. And I was just like, wait a minute, so I don't know what I was expecting, but that just wasn't the answer that I was expecting. Like, I was just like, this really seems like people were just kind of like hashing it out in a board meeting, and all of this is what's considered canon and what we believe, even though they dismissed this, that, and whatever. And I'm just supposed to, I'm already at the age where I'm just challenging authority, anyway. So I see this authoritative body who's like, making this book that affects all of humanity and everybody I know in my world and how they choose to live their life. And I'm just like, And so like once that happened, that's when the questions about God and his existence and his free will versus not having it, and all these deeper thoughts started creeping in. And then I started expanding from there into like Eastern philosophies and the Islamic faith and things of that nature, because for the longest, like, I knew what the Islam existed, but nobody ever bothered to tell me that how interconnected it was with Christianity and Judaism. As far as I was concerned, like, Islam was as completely foreign and separate from Christianity in every single way. And that those people weren't for Christians and Jesus, and they were very much against them. And like, of course, at the time when I found out like how many times Jesus was mentioned in the Quran, I was just like, what? What else are these people not telling me? And like I said, I got really enraptured in Eastern philosophy for the longest, and like those, I guess it reminded me a lot of like the Psalms and the Proverbs of the Bible, which has always been my favorite. Just the way
one of the most poetic aspects of the Bible.
But there was just so much of that, and like the Eastern philosophy that I just was like, what? I think I'm just gonna be like a Buddhist, and that was very appealing to me for a while. But even then, I was just like, oh, this is just another idea, because I've always looked at it, as we're just a bunch of kids looking through a stained glass window at the same thing, and we all just see it just a little bit different.
Yeah.
But none of us can tell each other exactly what we see, and it's just how existence goes for everybody. And for the longest, I was a fairly staunch atheist, and I was just like, there's nothing. I was just like, you people are just like deluding yourselves. And it's not to say that sometimes I still don't feel that way, but a lot of atheists, like, they hold their atheism as a religion of its own, and they mock you with an arrogance that maybe that they don't really deserve, because they actually don't know. So, right. So to even say that, I felt like I was also making myself an ideologue by being an atheist, and I just finally reached a point where I was like, the only real like freedom that you can have from these ideas that will eventually like corrupt the way that you think is just to not have them at all, and just exist on your own terms without the influence of them. But
I think I agree with you as far as the notion of atheism being it's a school of thought. There's almost a religious order to it, and there is undoubtedly an arrogance that comes to it. The irony I find with a lot of the hardline atheists is that a lot of their arguments that they say is science-based, one actually comes from theology, like most of it comes from Vatican-funded research, Vatican-funded data. That is what we would consider the Empire of Rome. Well, the Empire of Rome was defeated on a colonial level, mm-hmm. right? Like their empire, same thing happened with the British Empire, with imperialism. The same thing that slowly has been happening with America's empire. We're going to start, no doubt, seeing a lot of places outside of our borders that we control. We're going to start giving that up, I believe. But what were we just talking about? Lost my train of thought.
But just if you was raised in
atheism and school of thought. But like the idea of like evolution and like heliocentrism and all this, like these comes from the Romans. Like it comes from what the Romans have essentially moved into since like the days of like the Council of Nicene and the Jesuit army being formed, was that they started in the post-Renaissance controlling information. Like, so they developed chronology, right? And after they took Scaliger's work, Scaliger was not a Jesuit, but Scaliger was a very pro-Rome and pro-Venetian and pro-Vatican scholar who removed calendars, data, and critiques of astronomical coincidences from his findings, because he, quote-unquote, corrected them to be in line with Vatican scholars and Vatican predictions of the previous generations mm-hmm. before him. So then, I don't know if it was before or after he died, but the Jesuits and this other guy who was very pro-Jesuit took his studies, and they formulated our modern concept of history. And like Isaac Newton wrote about it like shortly before he died, about like, hey, like it looks like that not only is the world a lot older than what we're being taught, but it looks like that some of these ancient cultures are not Like, they didn't die off as old or as long ago as you all say. That, like, these are the argument of, like, Egypt and the Sphinx and the Africans, like, that is multi-generations that have used it. It was not just one nation or one empire that existed there. And they discarded all this stuff. But atheists will still use their data in order to support, like, something like Big Bang cosmology, which is also Vatican-funded data. So it's a way to control people with a school of thought. They got smart with it after they started losing control from within, right? Because the Jesuits was an anti-literacy movement. This was a huge divide in the Catholic Church as a response to Protestantism, which was already a way to break away from the Vatican. So, like, the Jesuit order, like, had a lot of warring sectors in it throughout generations. And so I think they became wise to it, and they were like, hey, you know what? If we market theology correctly, we can also take control of atheism and influence it as well. And they have.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just, with atheism, and the only thing you could influence is people's thought, because it's not any kind of a...
That's what it's all about.
Organization, though. I mean...
Well, think about how progressive that is. I mean, you take the same thing, the notion with, like, Antifa. Like, it's not like you have Antifa Inc. or anything, you know what I mean? Like, headquarters or, like, a leader.
But that's still such a small percentage of a population compared to Christianity or Islam.
For now, but, like, again, you're talking about, like, this type of cartel, man, like the Vatican.
Oh, I have no doubt that atheism will eventually form itself into its own, like, form of religion. But I mean, it's
scientism.
Yeah, well,
scientism it's what it is, but they don't want to call it scientism because scientism is not science. You know.
Yeah. But like I said, like, that's why I've always, like, strayed away from that label, because it's just one of those other places where people can pigeonhole you into this is how you think. And you're this because, like, especially if you're talking to somebody who's, like, you know, like a Southern Baptist Christian, and you explain that, you say, yeah, I'm an atheist, like, they're never going to understand you. Like, it's like they can't fathom, like, where you're at mentally. Like,
they've never hit that, or they're not willing to accept that terror.
Yeah.
That level of, like, existential
And that's exactly
terror.
what it is like, it is not a comforting place to go.
No.
Not when you first get there. It's not a happy place. Like, I was extremely like, emotionally distraught for a while, and, like, trying to come to terms with, like, if that's the reality, like, the profound effect that has on me and my life and my existence. And that's how you get, you know, nihilism, you know. But
you got to grow from it.
But yeah, that's exactly right. You grow from it. But, you know, I don't think everybody could do that or accept that, you know, because some people, like, they need their mind to be more comfortable than others.
I think that's definitely a part of it. I think another part of it is that they want an external catalyst to take them there.
Well, they need answers. They want answers. They need it keeps them calm and happy knowing that there's somebody out there who knows all the answers, which, like, God's debris. Like, that was one of the things about the book, is that one of the reasons that when you read the book, it makes you feel so comfortable with these ideas, is because it immediately starts off with an old man in a rocking chair who knows everything there is to know about everything, and that you can trust what he says. So he's using that exact same, like way of control.
It's an archetype.
Yeah.
Father Time, the white bearded man, as the archetype of God.
So you're primed to accept what he says is true.
Right.
You know, because of how you perceive him and who he is.
Let me ask you this as a quick interjection. If he talked about hollow earth rather than the dude with the pitchfork, do you think it would have affected you any differently?
No.
That's good. That's good.
No.
Because, again, I don't support it. I put that in the same realm as, you know, what if dragons were real?
I mean, there's a possibility that, like, because it's easy for a person to sit there and say, well, what you think is a conspiracy, blah, 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 and that, you know, the science feels right to me. And then, but when I say that, I have to take stock of exactly what my amount of scientific knowledge is about that particular subject.
Well, what you can refer to as to support your argument, right? Because I think it is a logical fallacy whenever it's the argument of authority, right? Because then you can take someone who, say somebody has worked in any field, worked for like 30 years in a particular industry. Like that person, you would just, on average, we'll say to be an expert if you've worked 30 years in a particular industry to know what you're talking about. Let's say, however, you don't have a piece of paper from a collegiate source that says you are an expert, but somebody else does that has 3 months of experience working in that field. Whenever you have the argument of authority, it will give credence and to the person with the degree, regardless of the time spent, just on the logical principle of it alone. So I think that, well, I get what you're saying. Like, I think that to use that as it is, you can paint yourself in a corner.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's just like, okay, well, I can say this, but like, I have vague working knowledge from what I understand and what I've been taught that there's an iron core, a liquid iron core in our planet, and that we're a massive object that sits within bent space, and we're rotating. So like the pressures and temperatures, wouldn't dictate that. But that's like such an elementary and vague understanding of it. And how can I hear you tell me your version of it without giving you the benefit of the doubt that you also have a higher knowledge of these particular sciences? Now, for a multitude of reasons, I'm still inclined to think that the Earth isn't hollow. But it's not to say that if enough evidence wasn't presented to me that I couldn't be flexible and change my mind. But at the same time, I would also be taking in a lot of other information that would work to counteract what you're trying to persuade me of.
I'm not trying to persuade anything, good sir.
But no, I'm just saying that's how.
Thought experiment.
I'm just telling you how, like, whenever like you tell me something like that, like it filters into my head.
Right.
And it would be easy for me to just be like, "You fucking crazy." But I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, because that would jive with the the vast majority of the population and the way that they think. That's
an opinion and not a critique.
But exactly, and that would be A, rude of me. B, it doesn't serve a purpose because I can't actually present you with a sound enough argument to dispute what you're saying, even if I still choose to disagree.
Right.
So. And this is why we've still been friends all these years, because we don't disagree with each other. I mean, even though we disagree, we still get along.
Yeah. I think that it is something that, like with me, it depends on like what we're talking about. So like.
But if you tell me I'm wrong, I'm never going to tell you that I said I was right.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't have a way to prove what I believe to other people. You know what I mean? Like, that's why it's a belief, right? So I think in the same notion you talked about with how a lot of fundamentalist type people, or for our demographic, hardcore religious folk, aren't willing to come to terms with the dread of potential atheism.
Yeah.
It's the same way I've found myself with, going on 5 years now with conspiracies, and that crushing worldview of like, well, wait a second, I haven't actually thought about a lot of these things that I was taught. And what happens is a lot of straw man arguments you see will get thrown out in order to get you to pay attention to something else. But we're not talking about whatever they're talking about. You have to focus on like what's going on, the argument. So one thing conspiracy theories do that I really love is that they take things that we are told is true, but yet they're still a theory. And there's a big difference between a concept of plausibility and possibility and probability and something being truthful and being true. So a lot of these things that were taught as kids, that as far as like they figured it out, like heliocentrism, like it's never been proven. And we have a generation in just the 20th, not a generation, but just a century of generations that was taught this. And it's a new idea. It's a new religion.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not taught that it's a religion. We're taught that it's science. And it's really not science because we can't use the scientific method to argue it. Well, I mean, you can now. I mean, you know, anybody that's ever watched a flat Earth video on YouTube or watched a debunking flat Earth video on YouTube knows that, like, there is a discussion and that people can use the scientific method to still have this argument. And, like, I like that because it's removed a monopoly of observations. So it's the same thing with, like, any facet of it. So pedogate stuff, 9/11, aliens, UFOs. Like, you have the ability for us now to share ideas and question the narrative. So it ties directly in with how I found the benefit of questioning religious authority and questioning that narrative and allowing myself to accept the fact that the argument for atheism has logic in it, just as the argument for theism has logic in it, and you have to accept those consequences and that fear.
But see, I don't know that that's necessarily like a testament to information being held back from us as more as a critique of the education system, considering that only like in the last 30 years we do more than just the 3 R's, you know, reading, writing, and arithmetic. We just barely was able to educate, you know, our populace on a grand scale as it is, you know, in the very recent times. So I mean, I think
history is written by the victors.
Oh, for sure.
And I think that has been one of the and by history, you know, social studies is usually this encapsulating thing that includes history, civics, and economics.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the bulk of it. But kids aren't taught history. You know, it's part of the social sciences that they just sort of lump in there. And I think that's where the education system failed the most. I never knew that the Vatican bankrolled the Nazis. I wasn't taught that.
I watched a show about that on Netflix the other day.
Yeah, and like, you know, I went to Catholic school. What made me?
Well, they're always playing all the sides, aren't they?
They are, exactly. It's the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
They had to shift forms because, again, they realized their survival for another 1,000 years, right, is sort of escape this global conquest, and instead they focused on a banking cartel as their conquest. Well, they fucking won. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, why wouldn't they though? I mean, there's always going to be, like, history was always going to have a group of winners who are always going to monopolize their power to their best advantage. I mean, so that's why I say sometimes with stuff like that, I don't know so much it's a conspiracy, so much as just powerful people doing what they do without telling the rest of the world about it.
I would respectfully argue that it is a conspiracy because you had people, literally groups, boards, conspire to remove this information from history books in the 20th century.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would make that a conspiracy, but that's just people trying to keep shit sealed up and on the down low, which is a conspiracy by definition. But I mean, it's powerful people doing what powerful people are going to do.
Yeah.
If I was, best believe there'd be some shady ass shit going on. But
if you ruled the world, right? Let's say
I'd rule with an iron fist.
The first 3 things, you have control to decide 3 things right away because you control the world. What are those 3 things? You may not get a 4th thing. The three things may end at your peril and all of our peril. So choose wisely.
I don't know. I'd actually almost elect not to put this on record because it's not pretty. It makes me sound like a horrible person. So
kill all the animals, burn all the trees, move everybody underground.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we're close to. I'd knock off a sizable portion of the population for sure.
What? Can't get behind that logic at all. But there's people that have legit arguments for overpopulation. I disagree. I think we should have more people. I think that
I don't like them that much. I'm just trying to make a large sanctuary for, dogs. That's what I'm trying to do. I just want, like to take America and turn it into one big giant dog, like playground.
You think, how they have a neurotechnology now to be able to allow people to communicate with one another even when they don't speak the same language?
Are you talking about the Neuralink?
That, and also like they'll even have inner ear auditory translators that using a microphone that'll translate for you. Do you think that we'll be able to get that with some sort of technology with pets?
I don't know, man. I sure hope so. And for the record, like if they start putting those on people, like I'm pretty quick to sign straight the fuck on up for that.
For real?
Yeah. Why not?
Damn, man.
What's the loss for me? I mean, possibly my life, but
yeah, that's what.
All right. Well, no. Let's say the technology gets there when I hit like my 80s or 90s. Like, why the fuck not?
So okay, so you're talking about like almost to where your consciousness can be transferred.
Even if it can't, even if it's just like an enhancement of it or whatever. I mean, okay, at this point, like, are they going to steal my privacy? Like, I'm an 80-year-old man. Like, I don't give a shit. Now, if you're
they can already steal my privacy.
I mean, we literally walk around with these tracking devices everywhere we go.
Yeah.
And we have social media. We tell the world everything we're doing.
That's not my only argument against the microchip theory, but that's a primary one. Is that like, hey, man, as far as the notion of tracking us, like right now, they can track us pretty much all together. Now, until there's some sort of EMP blast where like we don't have this technology anymore, then that's something else that'll come up. But I mean, I think the microchip stuff is fucking evil, and some people are doing it anyway.
Well, my thing is like, do I think things like that are healthy for society, and would I like to see measures put in place to restrain it, hold it back? In the time now, yes, but like if we get caught up in history and there's a time where they're like, we've got this technology and like people are doing it and like allows you to merge with machines or allows you to like have a virtual presence online and upload your consciousness to the web, and like I said, I'm like an 80-year-old man, like fuck yeah, man. Like what an opportunity for exploration on a different level. And let's say that you do find some form of immortality online and it is your actual consciousness. Like what an awesome trip to be on.
I don't know, man. It's
but that's making the assumption that there's like some kind of soul or something on us that's tethered to an afterlife, and if that's what you're thinking, that I'm interfering with.
Here's my it's my argument against clones, right? And I would think in some fashion transferring to the web would be a clone, just not in a biological sense, right? But let's say that it even is a biological sense. You have, which I think they do. I think Hollywood, they're superstars. There's too much money that's invested in celebrities. Mm-hmm. I think the president probably has like 20 or 25 clones. There's probably 20 plus of the orange bastard like walking around and tweeting and whatnot. It's the only way he can get shit done. But I would think that by doing so, your mind is your consciousness in this aspect, right? So we have our mind, our body, but there's also, in my personal belief, there's a trinity. There is our soul. There's our spirit. Mm-hmm. It's something that is tied to something transcendent. It separates us from the beasts, right? Like a dog has a mind. It has a body too, but I mean, like we're way different than a dog, and we've domesticated them to have aspects of our personality reflect on their mind and on their body. But I mean, still, we are separate from the beasts in that aspect. So I would think that a clone, your spirit wouldn't transfer. You'd only get 2/3 of yourself. So same thing with like uploading your consciousness. I think that would only be 1/3 of who you are. And I think that maybe it would. What if it did interfere with you, like transcending?
See, this is why I don't think. Well, I'm going to kind of backtrack what I was saying, because I don't actually think it's possible to actually. It's kind of like, have you ever heard the argument about the people on Star Trek whenever they're teleported? That each time they get in that teleporter, they're actually committing suicide. Because there's a copy being made of them and then digitally transferred to the next place, and then they are reconstituted. So it's not an actual, like, every molecule in your body is going to do what it does independently.
Yeah, it turns into molecular obscurity that reforms.
Yeah, exactly. And so if it's only a copy of it, then it can't be expected to behave in the same way that the original did. So how could it actually truly be you? It would just be a copy of you. Now, of course, I've heard people make the argument where there's a gradual integration of technology to where, like, eventually you start out with, I guess, the human mind, and slowly but surely it is integrated into a computer until it's nothing but that, and that's somehow in between, like, the consciousness is, you know, transferred over and it's part of the, you know, technology. But I find that a bit more of a stretch for them to reach on a scientific basis anytime remotely soon.
Yeah, I don't think the disintegration theory would, like, hold up. I think some, like, Jeff Goldblum fly shit would happen, where, like, when it reformed,
Yeah.
it would just be like, it'd be one form, like, and it would be mostly blue, and then, like, the one dude in the red suit, you know, because Star Trek, you know.
But my point is that, like, Captain Kirk, if he had a soul in that copy of his body, like, it would pass on each time he went back into the transporter, because it's literally killing him and just making the exact copy from the exact second that it took the scan.
Yeah, so he would be a ghost.
Yeah.
Right?
But he could haunt himself.
Yeah, but...
hundreds of times.
Yeah. So, like, it doesn't seem natural. Maybe that's a way for them to escape reincarnation, right? So they can't get through, like, the wormhole, right? But at the at the same time, they don't want to be cycled back through, because then they'll be in a new body, no memory. They're going to be, you know, wiped clean and
but
come
my
right
thing
back.
is, like, of course, and I'm not the smartest person on quantum entanglement, but
I'm not either.
But that's
I'm probably one rung below you, actually.
But it's where you like molest one object here, and then somewhere else they're entangled, and the exact same thing happens to them. So I would maybe assume that at some point that maybe the transporters use that, but quantum entanglement instead of.
Well, what's the expression? It feels like somebody just walked over your grave.
Yeah.
You know? So what if that is you, like, and you're a cosmic string wherever you're connected to in a parallel reality,
And
like,
just vibrate you into this reality.
Well, yeah, because you just died in that one.
Yeah, but then you would have still had to have got where you were going.
Right. So you have all these copies, and whenever, like, the one you're experiencing right now in this realm of reality, like, this is the one that is. I gotta shut this.
Well, where the fuck's the rich one?
It's either he's probably already dead. Man, the first time I got, like, really stoned. I was with a group of friends in a bathroom in a small apartment or townhouse, and, you know, I'm just there thinking to myself, you know, I think I'm like 19 or 20 at the time, and I come to this, you know, deep introspective realization that, what if I have already died, and the moment where you're shown your whole life flash before your eyes is now, and I'm being shown this, like, as a goes back to that testament of being judged, you know, what the ancient Amazonians and Americans believed whenever you die, that, you know, and you get a glimpse into that world briefly, so you can make adjustments to it. Well, to your current existence or whatnot. I'm telling you, this device right here, I've taken 2 vape pens. One is mixed berries. I would offer you some, except COVID.
Yeah.
Gotta be safe. We're socially distanced 6 feet away from each other over a round table discussion. But mixed berries and cool mint. And I've taken a hair tie and fused them together next to each other, and you've had the cool mint.
Yeah. I actually lost mine on vacation the other day. I got to go get me another one, but I was actually going to try a different flavor. So
the mixed berries, it's really good, like really good. But at the same time, it doesn't quite have the bark, the bite to it that, like, a menthol would.
Oh, nothing quite has the bite of a cigarette. Those beautiful creatures that I haven't had in 4 months now, we're gonna say.
Yeah, I backslid after my grandma died, and I was eating fast food regularly, and then smoking cigarettes, and then you and I went out to the bar that I hit you up, and I was like man, I want to go out, like I want to get drunk. So I think 3 drinks, and I was sloshed, and we walked home. It wasn't a packed bar, you know what I mean, but like because I don't like getting drunk. I got drunk at the last podcast, but I mean, it was special. Fucking went on a rant about Marxism near the end, arguing with nobody. Like my friends are just sitting there listening to me, but yeah, like I got fucking hammered. I can't do it. But cigarettes, man, the hardest next to speed, next to Adderall, it's the hardest drug that I've ever had to give up is tobacco.
It's quite the addiction. It is.
Like because there's nothing like it. There's no substitute for a cigarette. I will say though, I cleaned out my car the other day and I found a pack of cigarettes that had 1 cigarette in it, and I smoked that motherfucker down. Because again, like the problem with cigarettes is you can't buy just one. Yeah. You have to buy 20 of them.
Yeah. You can't even buy a 10-pack. You know. No,
like. I think the argument they made was that, well, it's easier for kids to get hooked if you just buy a Lucy than it is if you buy 20 of them. No. It's like, what fucking logic? The people that made our drug laws, Billy, fucking suck. They fucking suck.
Damn, Debbie do-gooders.
This is not doing good.
Yeah, I mean, but things, I have to say, like, since the 90s, like, the attitudes towards literally everything in general is vastly improved. And of course, we live in the good old Bible Belt, so I have no doubt that we'll be among the last to legalize, but there's always hope.
I've looked. I know we gotta wrap up here soon, but I'm looking into how legally we could use the 10th Amendment about rights that are not given to citizens, to individuals, by the government, are left up to the states or the people. And I think that if we can use that as a constitutional argument in the state of Georgia to look at getting a lot of folks released from prison, and getting a lot of justice and a lot of reform back to it, and challenging what the federal government has dictated for generations of people, and it's ruined a lot of lives, and it does not do good.
Half our problems we can blame on the war of drugs, really.
A lot of it we can.
Way to go, Reagan.
But I think that, though, as far as like how we've been approaching it, I think that the 10th Amendment, if we look into that and start approaching it from that angle, I think we can start seeing some real change. We've already seen, I have no idea why, but some of the Trump-appointed Supreme Court justices, like Gorsuch, ruling on trans rights recently. Like it was his proposal, and there was another one that came up that was like quite progressive as well, and like he like voted on it. And like this is somebody that was a conservative appointed person, but he's a constitutionalist, right? So I think if that's where the road is leading, which that's how it looks like it's going, is you're going to have more and more like iron-fisted ideologues in there, then we got to play at their level and at their game. I think the 10th Amendment, if we start looking at that as an argument against the war on drugs, I think we can start seeing some progress on it. Something you and I can unpack later, but just to put out there for anybody that's listening, look into the 10th Amendment and see if you see what I'm talking about. I think there's some logic that can be used there. Do you know your Constitution, sir?
They wrote down on paper.
But anywho, dude, thank you so much for doing this, man.
Hey, man, it was an absolute pleasure. It's just fun hanging out, man.
Fuck yeah, bro. If ever it does come to a point to where you want to get involved with promoting any anything that you do with your work on here or whatnot, just let me know, and we'll definitely we'll give your industry a plug for something.
Yeah, we always need people to spy on their spouses. You need creepy shit done? I'm your man. It feels so weird to say that because, like, you know, like a stalker always wants to get close to his prey. You know, like that's the whole point of what they're doing. And me, I'm just like, I want to go home and like have a drink and get as far away from you. If you go to Dollar General one more time, I'm going to pull all my hair out. And it's just like, you suck. You're a boring ass person. So I'm like literally mad that I'm stalking people. I'm just like, this sucks. But it's a living, you know. I love my job.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much, man.
Hey, man, not a problem. I appreciate you.
BFFs. Later, y'all.